Well, good morning. Welcome to the Commonwealth Transportation Board here on January 16th. Appreciate everybody being here today, and let me start by thanking Carol and the crew for last night. We had a great time sharing a little bit of food and some victuals, and thanks to our colleagues, Mr. Stanton, Mr. Folks, and Dr. Smoot, I think, who were hospitality sponsors last night, so certainly do appreciate that as well. It was great to be with everybody. And let me say this as well. When I got the notice last night that the Commonwealth was going to have a 2-hour delay in the Richmond district for employees to get here, I sort of smiled to myself. And when I woke up this morning, everything looked great. VDOT, as usual, had done a fantastic job yesterday and overnight and this morning, along with DRPT and all our partners. And so thankfully, we're staying ahead of it. It's a pretty good storm. They smacked them pretty good in Tennessee, I believe, but we are hopeful that we will stay ahead of this curve, and I'm confident that we're doing everything we can to do so, and we will do so. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and your folks. And all this goes on behind the scenes, and we sort of just know it's happening, but a lot of people working, a lot of moving parts, a lot of late nights, and a lot of extra work, so we certainly do appreciate all those. And I just hope that we remain safe during this time. That's the most critical thing in those kinds of weather events, and so we will keep them in our thoughts. So on a similar note, I think you all know our colleague, Ms. Hines, continues to be caregiver to her husband, who had a tough Christmas, unfortunately, so let's keep her in our prayers. I conversed with her last night and this morning, and she will not be joining us for the meeting today. But we wished her well and told her we were thinking about her and praying for her, and Patrick, her husband. So please do that as well. In addition, Mr. Kasperitz got some notice this morning and had to return home. He tells me he thinks everything's okay, but he had some things he had to attend to up at his place of residence that had gone awry. So please keep him in your thoughts and prayers, as well as he's traversing back to Northern Virginia today to take care. Those are sort of my housekeeping comments today. We have a good workshop meeting, a good action meeting after that. We'll break for lunch in between. And we won't rush through it, but we hope we get through it expeditiously so folks can get back on the highways and before it gets to be too bad tonight. So with that, if I could start our first agenda item. Mr. Rustup. Yes, sir. Mr. Stant. Oh, for God's sakes. Goodness sakes, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Stant. That'd have been a terrible thing. Appreciate it very much. All right, if you'll join me and Mr. Stant as we lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll say this, Mr. Stant, thank you so much. There are a lot of people in the world that wish they could do that every day. And so we sort of, growing up and, like everybody else here, we did it from the very beginning in school, and you somewhat tend to take it for granted when you do things so frequently. But I'm reminded, Mr. Stant, that it's not for granted. And so thank you for reminding me about that. Mr. Dudley. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's talk about a really exciting transportation alternatives program, which allows us to do some neat stuff.
This is the most exciting thing you will do as a board member. I promise you.
It's always very fun, Mr. Dudley. I've enjoyed it over the years.
It is. It is. I'm not joking. It is a very fun.
Well, let me digress for just a minute. One of the great things that Commonwealth's done over the years is sort of to get out of this process in terms of the general funding for highways. So we have these, scoring systems and processes and so forth that are really much better than the way it used to be. This is a little bit of a throwback, but it allows us to get intimately involved in some smaller but very important and impactful projects throughout the Commonwealth. And we've got a little bit of money that we help communities with, and it's really a good process, and it's enjoyable to see the sort of work that comes out of this in each of our districts and throughout the Commonwealth. So if you'll go ahead, Mr. Dudley.
Secretary, members of the board. So this presentation will kick off our biennial Transportation Alternatives Program application selection process. Many of you have already been through this, you've been through this before, so much of this will be familiar to you. There'll be a few little changes. This will be brand new for a few of you, so please stop me if you have any questions as we move along, and I'd be happy to answer those questions. I brought some phone home help in the back here for me too, so in case I can't answer the questions, they're the smart people in the room for, as far as I'm concerned. We have a process that I'll go through, and you have a packet of information in front of you that I will refer to in just a little bit. And I will follow up with this presentation with an email to everyone with the packet of information electronically. So do we say that anymore electronically? I just send it to you in a PDF form and you'll have it. So you don't have to hear every word I say up here. So what I'd like to do is first go over what the program is, just a reminder, and then we'll go into the application cycle. The program is a federal aid program. It's been in existence in one form or another since the early 1990s. The program provides funding generally for projects that support non-motorized modes of travel. There are 8 general categories of funding, and I'll go through those in the next slide. And the program requires a 20% match, and we require that match to come from the applicant, which is typically a local government. Other folks are eligible, like universities, the federal government is eligible, and things like that, but generally it's local governments that we get these applications from. The federal program also provides an off-the-top distribution for recreational trails, which goes to the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And then the funds come to us that must be distributed across the state, with 59% of the money going to specific population areas and 41% is available statewide. And I'll show you a chart where that money all needs to go in just a second. Because the state DOT and the large MPOs, or those are the ones with the transportation management areas, make the selections, we cannot apply for the funds. So the last 3 bullets on here, I'm sorry, are more specific to Virginia and our CTB policies. Of course, it's a biennial process. We require all our projects to reach a construction phase within 4 years. Generally, they're small projects, so 4 years is not unreasonable. And the maximum distribution to any one project is $2.5 million in federal funds. These are our 8 eligible categories for TAP funding. Most of our applications fall in the first 3 categories here. So generally, we're providing funding for bicycle and pedestrian improvements, but we do get our fair share of historic preservation project requests also. Before you ask what a boulevard from divided highways is, I'll go ahead and tell you. We've never funded one in Virginia, but the definition right off FHWA's website is a walkable, low-speed, divided arterial thoroughfare in an urban environment designed to carry both through and local traffic, pedestrians, and bicyclists. So I went out to look to see, well, where are these things? The closest I could find were 2 in Washington, D.C. You might be familiar with them, the South Capitol Street and Southwest Freeway, which are being turned into boulevards to relieve local streets of the interstate overflow traffic and connect pedestrian and multimodal traffic on both sides of the Anacostia River. So we haven't seen any of these, but I do get that question quite often because it is a separate category. All right, so I'm going to mention the safe.
Back up, please. You
I think I was
you
on.
did. Yeah, you weren't talking.
I was on this slide.
Correct.
I was on this slide, but I was talking to that slide. So I'll let you guys catch up. There's the boulevards at the bottom. Just throw something at me if I do that again. And
thank you.
Let me get to the next slide here. All right, I'm going to mention the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program separately because it's a little different than our other program eligible categories in that it is non-infrastructure. That is, we do not build anything in this category. You'll have a brochure in your pack that explains what the program is, but generally the funding is used for K through 12 schools, it used to be K through 8 schools, to encourage and support bicycling and walking to schools because that's a healthy activity. So it can help fund bicycle pedestrian coordinator positions at the schools, developing plans that identify projects that are needed to provide safe routes. So in that way, it does lead into infrastructure projects. It can fund events that encourage bicycling and walking to school also. It was incorporated into the TA programs at the federal level several years ago, and now has been fully integrated into the TAP program within the states. We received 6 of these applications this year, and I'll go over that, and you'll see the applications listed separately in your packet of material.
And Russ,
Yes, sir.
those are just part of the whole package that we look at. There's no set aside, there's no carve out.
There's no set aside, there's no
They're looked at like
carve-out.
everything else.
We just identified those things. We think it's an interesting program. It's a very valuable program. We wanted to point those out to you. Generally, they're low value, low dollar requests. So we do ask that you give those
Yeah, let's
consideration.
rephrase that, low dollar request.
Low,
right?
I'm sorry, you're right. Low dollar request, high value, low dollar request.
That's what we hope for.
That is.
That's
yeah.
what we strive for, Mr. Dudley. Thank you.
Words matter. So let me go over some of our policies here. Our board policies does require that we fully fund the application selected up to $2.5 million per project. So this is the federal money, and you will each get a pot of federal or a distribution of money that you can use. The available allocations are distributed to the board members equally, except that the district members will select individually, and our at-large and secretary will select the projects as a block at our April CTB meeting.
So the non-district members, Mr. Dudley, get to have their own party. Is that what you're telling us?
They sort of. You
And
get
the
to have your
district
own-
members are not
your own
invited.
Party,
Is
but
that
you
right?
know, I think parties are more fun when you have a larger group of people than by yourself.
You know, I make that comment a little bit in jest, but for those of y'all who have not been involved in this for some time, or as long as I have, and this program has moved around in terms of how we've allocated the funding. And it used to be the district members had a outsized piece of that, and the at-large members did not. And the secretary had none, and then the secretary had some, and it's all moved around. But we've gotten to a better place where we just sort of divide it up, and everybody's the same, and we move on.
Yes, Mr.
And so
Secretary, we
we're
would
sort
definitely
of
want to
glad,
make sure.
we're sort of glad to be there. So
we
that's
definitely
why-
wanna make sure you
that's
have-
why I
you
was-
have some.
That's why I was making the jest about the party that we're having.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. So let me explain the block selection process. We do that to help ensure that our population area money is, that does not get distributed by our district members, does get distributed at some point in time along the selection process. So if not all the population area distributions or allocations are distributed during the nine selections from our district members, our first responsibility as the at-large members will be to make sure those population areas gets funded. Because like you'll see, I have an under 5,000 population area. I can only use that money in population areas that are under 5,000, so I can't use it anywhere else. So that's.
Mr. Dudley, what you're trying to say is that the at-large members do the cleanup from the
They do-
district members.
I would say they're batting fourth, so they're cleaning up. So that's the most important job that you have. That's where you get the home runs and you score your runs. So in terms of the applications we received this year, a little busy slide, but this provides an overview of all the applications we received. We did start with 166 pre-applications, which after a significant amount of work with our districts and our local assistance division, resulted in 104 final approved applications. So we do have $128.6 million in total requests for projects valued at about $242 million. We have about $106 million to distribute, and 61.8 of that is available to the CTB members for distribution, and I'll show you that over the next 2 slides. So you see here, as usual, Nova wins. They have the highest number of applications, but it's followed very closely by Hampton Roads and Richmond. As I mentioned, the allocations are distributed by both our large NPOs and the CTB. So this slide provides the approximate allocations available to each of our NPOs.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Sellers.
What's behind these numbers? What's the income that comes to generate the
What's the revenue
900,000?
source?
Yeah, the revenue source.
So if you're asking where the values come from, so it's a population formula that the feds use. So everywhere, so in all the population areas are distributed across the state based on a proportional amount of population. So
It's a federal
formula gives
it's a
Nova, because
federal
they're-
formula.
It's a federal formula, so like Nova has the largest group of people, so they're gonna get that, that amount, it's a $19.5 million. And then Hampton Roads, and you see Richmond, Tri-Cities is the Colonial Heights. So it's basically it's proportionate to the population of those areas.
I think the answer, Ms. Sellers, is we just run the federal formula, which cranks this out. They give us a certain amount of money. We put it in the formula, and it tells us what we're allowed to allocate to each region based on their population.
I will add.
There's no decision-making in here,
Yeah.
no policy by this board. no.
Yeah, that was my question is where are these, because Fredericksburg, it's just a little interesting, we're so much lower than where we're typically as a district.
And Mr. Dudley, maybe we can get Ms. Sellers afterwards and get
Yeah.
through the whole
And you can see-
calculation.
If you see the map, you'll see that part of the transportation management area that provides the funding is really part of the Northern Virginia area that feeds down into Northern Stafford. So it's a small little piece. That's why you have such a small piece here. It's a small piece of that large area.
I spent 4 years on PRTC because of that little piece.
That's it. That's exactly what it is. So you
You understand now?
So FAMPO has that population amount of money, the proportionate amount of money for that small piece that comes down into North Stafford. Yeah, sure, we can do that, and our CFO can probably give you real detailed information how it gets split up.
I think the important point is that there's no policy here, there's no decision that we're making, there's nothing that we're doing at the state level that has anything to do with any
Yes,
of
sir.
this.
Yeah,
It's
yes, sir.
merely a federal formula and a federal monies, and we just follow the rules.
Ms. Farmer, would you want to add anything to that at all? Are we good? We're not good, so she's gonna give you a little more detail.
Just to provide clarity, there's no formula the state runs. There's apportionment details that are provided by MPO area. So we are constrained to those values, and we distribute our obligation authority to each of those apportionment categories. But this detail is provided to us.
Thank you.
Does it much better than I do. So this is these are the amounts that are available to our CTV members. And you notice we do have population areas that are outside the MPO areas. So we have $35.5 million that's available statewide. That money can go anywhere across the whole state. We have $20.4 million, which is a significant amount, that has to be placed in population areas under 5,000. Then we have this is a new category that our bill, our Bipartisan Infrastructure Act added. We have 1.9 that has to go to population areas between between 5 and 50, and then 50 to 200,000. So these are the way it's split. You don't have to worry about the splits generally. We'll get to that when we get to the at-large selections. You select the projects, and I'll get into the selection in a second, and then we'll take the projects from the district selections and figure out where they all laid and how much is left to get done, and then our at-large members will clean up.
Mr. Dudley, I do think it's important to note a couple things. One is that you can see this program drives a lot of disproportionate funds to small areas, right? That's really where it's targeted, where you see $20.4 million going at population areas under 5,000 people. And what I would ask you to do as you go through this process is, as a district member, is to be thoughtful about that as you go through this, because to Mr. Dudley's point, if you don't do any of this, then you sort of left it for the non-district members to do all of it, meaning to hit these targets, these not targets, requirements for a certain amount of money to go to certain places. So just as you go through the process, just be thoughtful of that. That's going to have to happen at one point or another, and if the district members don't do any of it, then the at-large members will have to do all of it. And so as you look at your projects, be thoughtful about that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So, so you see the bottom two rows there are just things we have to keep in mind. We have to give $14 million to multipurpose trails. That's per our state budget language. And then we hold back $2 million to leave in our balance entry just to account for future needs for projects. Maybe the estimates are low, or they get high bids, or whatever it might be. So when you do the math and you split it by 15, this is $4.12 million per board member. And that's quite a bit more than we've had in the past. Before, it's only been $2 million per district board member, but this is This is quite a bit more than we've had in the past.
And Mr. Dudley, I think it's important because we got some new folks that have not been through this or have only been through once. We encourage you to work with one another to help each other, right? So we've got some criteria and, we're trying to fund at a certain level and so forth. And you may not have enough money, but one of your friends might have some money and vice versa that you can move around and help get projects fully funded because that's what we're looking to do. So as we go through that process, we're looking to sort of team up as best we can, so that if you need some help, you got a teammate to give you a little bit of help.
Yes, sir. We don't care where the money comes from. It's just as long as it's fully funded.
Yes, sir, Mr. Coleman, thank you. Absolutely. Great word.
So in case you're wondering about the population areas, we just wanted to show you the map of the different population areas in the state. So you can see the MPOs in the pink, and then the green is the 50 to 200,000 areas. So just general population areas in the state. So now we get down to the selection process, and it can really get boiled down to 4 general steps. The first step is the CT district members and our MPOs will get their allocations and make their selections and provide them to local assistance division. During the steps, you're not alone. Our district offices will reach out to you and provide you any assistance you need. They'll provide you some support and guidance. They'll let you know, what's done in the past, answer any questions you have. They will also coordinate with the MPOs that have their own selections in the areas to make sure we don't have any overlap in selections. Again, if the MPOs want to fund something halfway and you want to fund something the other halfway, that works too, as long as it gets total and we give a complete funding for the project. Those selections will come back to us and we'll scrub those selections and provide the rest of the information to our at-large members. So we'll let you know, hey, we have $10 million we have $10 million left in under 5,000 population money. We got to spend that. We got to make sure we spend that. We'll give you recommendations on basically by score. Here are the projects we recommend you select. The projects you select are totally up to you, but we'll provide recommendations to make it easy on you. We'll get together in April. We'll talk about it. We'll haggle a little bit. We'll get the project selected, and then we'll put those in our SYIP public hearings, and they will be allocated in June. So in your packet of material, you see these items. We're going to give you scorecards. We give you the policy. The policy's new, just a couple of years ago. We'll give you a list of current active projects by district, just FYI, with the status of those projects. We'll give you the safe routes to school information. We'll also give you a list of the multi-use trail projects. So if you want to say, well, is this a trail project? Does this count for my $14 million? You can see it. And then we will give you our contact information in case you have any questions. I'll go through a few of these here too. So the most important thing you have in your packet is this scorecard booklet. And again, you're going to get these electronically, and they'll be in your SharePoint folder for the CTB, and they'll be attached to the CTB website. So the first page gives you instructions on how to read the scorecards. It's pretty easy. If it looks familiar, we intended it that way. It looks a little bit like the Smart Scale scorecards. So we've done that on purpose. Then afterwards, you have a statewide summary of all the projects. You'll have their scores and how their scores rank statewide and by district. It will identify any existing project that's asking for more money, and it will identify separately those safe routes to schools non-infrastructure projects. So you'll see it all on the front page, or on the right up front. And for each project, it'll tell you to what page you can go to look for the detailed scorecard. And then the rest of the booklet is divided by district, and it starts with a map of the district showing where all the applications are in the district, where they're coming from. Then it provides a detailed score sheet for each application, and those score sheets are in order of score. High score first, all the way down to the low score. So there's a illustration or a picture of the scorecard. What you'll find on here, some of the basic stuff. You'll see the project name, description. You'll see the applicant. You'll see the total score and the project score ranking, both compared statewide and within the district. So you'll get to see everything. And And then we include some additional project details, and where necessary or where we think appropriate, we'll add some notes that we may think you may be interested in as we go through it. And then you'll see how the project scored per scoring criteria. You see the little histogram there that has the 4 little pieces. And our projects are scored based on 4 criteria. Project delivery and funding, project concept and benefit, readiness to proceed, and then we have a deductive score. I'll briefly go over these, but if you'd like some detailed discussion on these criteria, let me know, and I can sit down with you, and we can go through the whole thing. It's too much to really kind of take all that time today. So first, we look at the project delivery and funding. Here, we analyze the ability of the locality to deliver the project. So we ask, do they have a reasonable plan for funding their match? For example, is the funding in place, or is it dependent on somebody else's future action? We ask, are they going to be using cash, or are they going to be using volunteers? Or some donations to make their matching requirement. We also look to see if they already have a consultant in place, or what their plans are for hiring a consultant, or maybe they're going to use in-house expertise. Then we look at project concept and benefit. Here we look to see if the project they are proposing aligns with the needs they say they have. And we are also looking at the benefited community. Are they benefiting a small group of people, or are they benefiting the whole entire community? Then we look at readiness to proceed, probably one of the more important ones. I would say they're all important, but this might be one of the most important ones. And here we look at activities that contribute to the completeness of the project plan as submitted. We look to see if they've done public involvement activities. Do they have good detailed estimates? Do they have conceptual plans? Have they identified potential developmental barriers and right-of-way needs? These are all the things that really support the project's ability to reach construction in 4 years, which is really what we want to do. We want to get projects on the ground and get the money spent as quickly as possible. And finally, we do have a deductive measure. And not the most popular thing for everybody, but here we do look at past performance in those localities that are requesting the funding. We look to see if they've had any canceled projects over the past 5 years. We look to see if there are any current projects that are beyond 4 years from award and haven't reached construction. So are they slow in getting the projects done? We also look to see if we are in the process of canceling or deallocating any projects because of slow progress. So again, we want to make sure these projects get on the ground, they're ready to go, the projects get started, the money gets spent. These are not large projects. These should not be large projects. Because we do want to make sure that existing TAP projects have the funding they need to be completed, we identify existing projects for your funding prioritization. So you'll see that listed separately. If it's an existing project, that means they've come back, they're asking for more money, and we don't want to prioritize those because we want to get them awarded. You won't see much of that anymore because our new policy is we will fully fund the request, and then you can only come back and ask for additional money based on SYIP policy. So limited amounts of increases. So do a good estimate right off the bat, and you won't have to worry about it in the future. And then we don't provide a separate score for this, but we do want to provide you information regarding underserved communities. So we let you know whether this does serve an underserved community. So you can take that into your consideration when you select the project. So it's not in the scoring today. It will be in the future.
Ms. Sellers.
You say you're going to look at past performance. Can TAP money be used on smart scale projects as well? And will
They can be mixed.
They can be mixed? And so somebody's underperformance in smart scale, will that impact TAP?
We look outside TAP when we looked at, so I'm getting the nod. We did look at local projects in general. So if they weren't meeting so we have this new sustained performance program. If they are identified in there, then we're certainly going to tag them, and or if they're general.
And let me say this, Ms. Sellers. This is so much better than it was 13, 14 years ago in terms of this process. They've really improved a lot over the time. But just like Smart Scale, we're not bound by it, strictly bound by it. And so that's why we have members like y'all who can look at this and synthesize the information and sometimes make a different decision than just the top one gets it and the bottom one doesn't. And so that's where you come into this process. So what we're trying to do is to provide you a bunch more information than you had before so that it will help you make those decisions, but not handcuff you into a strict ranking funding. Otherwise, there's no need for us to be here. If we're just going to do it on a strict ranking basis, that's done. But that's not how we do it. So it allows us to sort of put other factors in there, other things that we know and understand, and make some decisions in that regard. I think that might go to some of the thinking that you're having. Yes, sir, Mr. Merrill.
Yeah, thank
I saw
you.
you grab the mic. I figured you wanted to say something. Thank you, sir.
If a district has applications which are below their allocation, are those funds able to be distributed elsewhere?
Yes, sir. You are not limited to your district.
You can go anywhere with your money.
Chairman Sellers would love to have some of your funding over there.
Yeah, man, you've already started.
I'd like to take a few people to dinner tomorrow night.
There's a bid and ask going on, and it's all in jokes, folks. It's all joking. There's a bid and ask happening over here. Yeah, you can put it wherever you think it best goes.
Absolutely. So because the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure, the projects are so much different than our infrastructure projects, we do have different scoring criteria for them. And I won't go into the very details, but these are the things we mainly look for. We want to make sure the applicant, has a good plan for the funding. In other words, we want to make sure they've done their homework. For example, do they even know how many of their students actually walk or bike to school? We want to know whether funding support Title I schools. And we prefer to fund projects that spend actual money on the students rather than on salaries for administrators. So a little different. Again, you only have 6 of these. They are ranked, but you only have 6 of these to choose from. And in the packet of information, you will also have, as I mentioned before, a list of all the TAP projects across the state, and you can see the status that they're in, whether they're in project development or in construction. Just FYI, just so you can see that. And not on the slide, but we did, as I mentioned, include a list of qualifying trail project applications, just FYI. So our next steps, we're providing the information today, and again, you'll have it in your in your share folder. You have it here, hard copy, so you'll have it both ways. If you want it any other format, just let us know and we'll get it to you. Our district offices will reach out to you, to district members, to give you support and offer support. We will be there for the districts if they'd like some extra support, or if you'd just like us to answer some questions. We're asking that those selections be back to us in LAD by February 13th. After February 13th, we will digest all those applications and provide that information back out to the at-large members sometime in March. And then we will have our April meeting with us, where we'll either before or after the meeting, we'll get together all the at-large members and the secretary and make the final selections. Projects then go into the SYIP public hearings. Any questions? I know that's a lot of information, short amount of time.
Mr. Stant.
Russ, as I recall, I made a deal with the TPO on some things to say I was running out of money. And I went to the TPO and I said, hey, I'd like to do this, but I'm only going to do it if you guys agree to fund the necessary money to finish the project. So I assume that is still available.
That's a great idea. That's perfect.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yep.
And I was going to say to Mr. Coleman's piece about collaboration, there's nothing to say, as a non-district member, and I've only been a non-district member on this board, there's nothing to say that your district member can't take along a couple of their regional colleagues and sit in a meeting and share information, and vice versa. So the money is totally fungible, to Mr. Merrill's question earlier. You can take your allocation and you can put it anywhere in the state that you want. And you can collaborate with your colleagues to do that. The key here is we need to be fully funded. So the point is you can't do, to your point, halfway doesn't work. You got to be full way. So you get a little bit of help from your friends, they get a little bit of help from you, and we work it all towards the middle. And so whether you're a district member or a at-large member, or a TPO, MPO. We just need to work together, collaborate, get the best answer.
Yes, sir, Mr. Secretary. The only thing we will do is we will make sure the money is in the right place.
Right
So-
buckets.
Yep, so if we run out of statewide money, if we run out of statewide money and you want to put the money in place that,
We just
don't-
need
we
to
don't
fill
have
each bucket
population
up
money
along the
for it.
way. That's all we need to
right,
do.
we'll work that out and we'll let you know if we're out of money in some category. We try to make that as transparent as possible. Sometimes, we'll just let you know when we get to that point.
Dr. Smoot.
Thank you. Russ, two questions. The $14 million that you showed earlier that had been set aside by the legislature for trail projects, I assume, and you can confirm or not, those are the 5 projects that were identified in the Appropriations Act?
Sir? No, sir.
Okay, what are they?
They're open.
These are any multi-purpose trail projects. So that was identified a couple of years ago in the budget language.
Okay, so this would be in addition to what was set aside for those 5 specified.
It's in addition, but it's not restricted to those 5.
Right.
It could be any.
Got it. Thank you.
And I believe we have about $66 million worth of applications that meet that criteria. We
Okay.
always get a lot of trail applications, so we won't have any problem with the 14 million.
Okay, second question. I assume that for the purposes of this program, that an electric bike is not considered a motorized vehicle.
Well, we're not funding electric bikes, but we will fund the trails, and the trails today do allow certain voltage of electric bikes on those.
Yeah, that's my
multipurpose-
question.
Yeah, yes.
An electric, because there is a prohibition, at least it appeared to me, or shown earlier, for trails for motorized vehicles.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion going on. I think Terry knows a lot about it, and I know there's a certain class of electric bike that trails will allow, depending on the trail, will allow on the trail. They don't want an electric bike that can go 50 miles per hour, of course, on a trail. But yeah, we're building the trail, the multipurpose trail, and if the electric bikes are allowed on the multipurpose trail, then they're allowed on the trail.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Dudley.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it very much. Good report. Ms. Farmer, the next agenda item is the preliminary FY 25 to 30 CTF 6-year financial plan. Good morning, Ms. Farmer. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary and members of the board. Each January, I come to the board to provide a preliminary look of the financial picture. Every other year is a smart scale round, and I generally give you a preview of what the funding available for the next smart scale round will be. This being the year between rounds, what will be provided is how these programs' fundings change with the updated revenue picture and the adjustments that we'll make in the subsequent draft 6-year improvement program as a result. So in terms of the state transportation update, just as a reminder, the Virginia Department of Taxation provides the revenue estimates that VDOT uses to estimate the funds available for distribution through the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. The December revenue forecast gave us an update through fiscal year 2030. Due to the assumed economic outlook, transportation revenues are slightly down over the course of the period of $405.5 million over the previous assumptions through fiscal year 2029, or 1.3%. The revenue forecast we received also included the estimated revenues that are directed to transportation from the governor's 2024 tax policy proposal. Per this proposal, the amount attributable to any additional sales and use tax revenue generated from the taxable services and digital personal property and distributed to the CTF would be directed off the top as follows. Half of it would be provided to the Transportation Partnership Opportunity Fund, and the other half would be directed to the I-81 Corridor Improvement Fund until the end of fiscal year 2031, or such time as the total amount provided to I-81 is $400 million. The allocation, since it was included in the revenue forecast we received and the details of this estimated impact on the tax policy change were provided to us, we have staged that for in the 6-year financial plan. until such time as the tax policy is recommended. The table at the bottom just provides the annual estimated impacts of this change and the distribution to each TPOF as well as IAD1. As you can see, in 2032, the IAD1 commitment is fulfilled at $400 million under these current assumptions, and those funds would go back to the top of the formula and be redistributed after the 81 commitment is fulfilled.
Yes, sir, Mr. Merrill.
Is this 400 million separate from what was in the original legislation of the 2.2 billion for the
Yes.
81?
That's correct. It's
so it's
considered
This is all new money
All new money, okay, just,
for both TPOF and for 81 that would be associated with the governor's proposal to change how we do some taxing in Virginia. Yes, sir. So this would be additional money going to 81. It's, right now, we're at 3 point something with 81. This would be on top of that, Mr. Merrill.
This slide just provides the standard view of the CTF revenue estimate and its components. We've isolated the governor's tax policy proposal separate from regular retail sales and use tax estimates. And it provides the total at the bottom of the state revenue anticipated for the period through 2030.
Let me go back up a second, Laura, let me say something. The governor is focused on trying to ensure that we do everything that we can do to make 81 as good as we can make it, as quick as we can make it. And so we've spent a lot of time over the last 6 months, 8 months or so digging into that. We've had tremendous amounts of work that the commissioner and others, consultants have done to look at creative ways to make it go faster or go better, from P3s to everything you can possibly imagine. And we are assured by all the work that we've done that the course that we're on is the right course, but that we certainly could always use some extra help, and that's what this is about. I would tell you that JLARC also has a study going on 81 that we're cooperating with as well. And so, you know, if there's ways to advance that, make it go faster, be better, we're certainly trying to pursue that in general. And so I just wanted to make that note. That's one of the reasons, Mr. Merrill, that $400 million is in there. The challenges at 81 are, you know, we could spend all day talking about that, but it's always harder to go faster when you're going as fast as you can, given federal regulations, contractor base, studies, engineering, design, and so forth. But that's what we're attempting to do, is to accelerate and continue to drive value into the 81 plan. Thank you, Ms. Farmer.
This next slide just provides a view of the revenue changes to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund since prior assumptions. So since we adopted a budget, a 6-year program in June, and the revenue assumptions from December of 22, these are the changes by individual revenue source, as you can see. So we expect motor vehicle sales and use tax in the current year, based on current projections, is doing very well and exceeding expectations. So they increased the revenue estimate by $100 million. But you can see it drop off. That's just the general highlight from this slide. It also provides a total impact for across the board based on the overlapping years, and then the total without the tax policy proposals. So you see the reduction of $405 million.
Yes, Ms. Sellers.
And maybe we could talk about this offline, but on this graph, so I see this new, it's highlighted, and we say it's new money, so why are all the rest of these going down? Are they taking money from these other sources and putting them into this new program?
Mr. Secretary, Ms. Sellers, this is a brand-new revenue source, so it is not currently in the retail tax base, and so it's additional money provided to transportation, and it's dedicated to TPOF and 81. So it's just highlighted that it is part of, we receive retail sales tax today, and this is in addition to. The rest of them have unique economic factors that taxes applied changes to based on their projection.
I think the short answer is they're not related, okay? the basic tenets of the governor's tax policy had to do with shifting taxes off of income to use, particularly in the tech sector where all this streaming services and all sorts of things that we used to pay sales taxes on when we bought a video or a DVR or whatever it was, DVD, that's all gone now. Now it just comes over the wire and it's not taxed. So we've had this huge shift in the technology and it's changed how revenue flows. So the governor's very focused on the fact that we are a relatively high tax state and we're trying to get that down. And he's done, part of his proposal is to change the income tax on individuals and tax credits and so forth, while shifting some of that burden over to, if you will, taxes on things that have gone untaxed as technology has shifted and changed. So that would be reflected in the 513 line. The other lines are pretty much independent of that. It's just the vagaries of the economics as it's projected out. Now, obviously, we don't exactly know what 2029 is going to look like, but this is a bunch of smart people sitting in a room, Gaker and others and economists and people that sit here and try to project where we're going to be in these out years. And this is just a follow-on. This is just how it runs down the waterfall as it hits us. So they're generally unrelated. Those two things are unrelated in this slide.
Is this going to be a pretty strong revenue source? I mean, it's new, and it sounds like it's untaxed, so have the localities jumped on board and said, hey, where's our share?
Well, the localities don't necessarily get to jump on board, ma'am. That's part of the
But you, yeah.
way the state and localities work.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah. Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And this,
Hold on a second. Mr. Lawson's going to correct me on something.
Well, I just wanted to add, with the change in the retail sales tax, that is in part of the governor's tax policy, it impacts retail sales tax across the board across the state. So anywhere that a real estate sales tax is collected, we'll get an impact, we'll get an uplift from it, whether it's the local 1% or whether it's the regions, everybody gets more. It's just that the tax policy specifically said that the portion of the retail sales tax that is attributable to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, that it's getting an increase from the tax policy change will be used specifically for those two purposes. So so it does impact everybody as an uplift.
But the point is that the 513 is not, the state insurance premium tax of going down 90 is not connected to the 513.
That is correct.
That's the
Yeah.
point we're trying to make.
All
here.
the other changes, as Laura noted on the previous slide, are just, and as the Secretary was speaking, are just the results of the new economic impact model that tax, or excuse me, the tax has assumed as part of the December forecast update.
Mr. Coleman.
yes, thank you,
So-
Mr. Secretary.
Sorry to pause you, but I wanted
no
to make sure Mr. Lawson wasn't
I'll be here all day.
not getting me straight. Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Perhaps this has already been addressed, but I see motor fuel taxes. Is there any policy that's been adopted to compensate the state for electric vehicles?
I can speak to that. There is a registration fee. There's a program when you register your vehicle. If you have a high miles per gallon situation with your vehicle, whether it's a hybrid or whether it's all electric or whatever it is, you have an imputed amount of mileage that they're going to charge you for that you would have paid gas tax on. And there's an average that we use. And so they take that average and mark up your bill, your registration bill, by the tax differential, but they discount it as well. So you get a little bit of a discount. I think it's 20% or 25%, Ms. Farmer, do you recall? John, do you recall?
Charge is 85%, so it's a 15%.
85, so it's a 15% discount off the average. And there's a process that if you're not at the average, if you're below the average, you can come in and show some verification and actually have your bill reduced. If you only drive to church on Sundays, Mr. Coleman, you only drive 1,000 miles a year and you can show them that, then they'll work that in. I don't think the people that drive a lot more than that come in to show us their bills and let us charge them more, but there is some relief at the bottom end.
Sir, and to Mr. Secretary's point, the highway use fee, which is the last source on this table, is that newer revenue source that was implemented in 2020 to attempt to offset the loss of fuel tax revenue due to more fuel efficiency.
So if you look at the motor fuels tax, Mr. Coleman, at 9.7 billion, the 411 is the piece that you would add to that to get the total. And so you can sort of see that there. Thank you. Anybody else?
Secretary?
Yes, sir.
I'm still
Mr.
trying to
Merrill.
understand, what is the basis for the $303 million reduction in motor fuels tax? Is that consumption? The expectation there'll be less fuel sold? or is
It's a combination of consumption and rate. It's consumption, really.
Mr. Secretary,
Sir,
the reductions,
Dr. Smoot, sorry.
excuse me, thank you. The reductions in motor vehicle sales and use tax, what is anticipated to cause that?
That's not that's all volume.
Well, what, like in 2025, down 24 million and 26?
Dr. Smith, we can get you a better answer. We don't, the tax department projects the tax revenues.
Yeah. I mean,
We
would
take
it
them
almost
and-
have to be a decline in vehicle sales
Could be. Or value,
or value?
the total value.
Then I'd be curious about that.
Hasn't the governor proposed eliminating that
No.
car tax?
No, sir. This is the tax you pay when you purchase a car at 4.15%.
Which is relatively high amongst the states.
We can dig in a little bit for each of y'all if you have specific questions, but these are estimates that are given to us through the whole tax process. So we're not creating these per se. We're taking them and cranking them through our formula. Thank you, Ms. Farmer, if you continue.
Yes, sir. So given that picture from the state revenue, we derived a preliminary look at our 6-year financial plan. The value as it's identified to pass through for allocation to all the modes of the Secretariat. Our preliminary value for the 6 years is $54.9 billion. This includes the use of $750 million of planned debt for Route 58 and I-81 over the period. We're transferring just over $6 billion to the 3 regions. $577 million of the forecast is fuel tax revenue dedicated to I-81. We're dedicating $16 billion to maintenance and operations over the period for both VDOT and locality payments, and $17.8 billion for construction. And of that number, about $3 billion of construction continues to be a large share of funds from others, from the regional entities as well as local bodies who participate in projects that the department is delivering.
Questions? All right, thank you.
This slide provides a view of those 6-year estimated revenues available, sorted by state transportation revenues, our federal assumptions, the other financing related to debt. We have planned debt for I-81 and Route 58 and have continued that we will not program any new Garvey bonds in the future for now. And then provides a total operating revenues as well as what's provided to the regions for a total of $54.9 billion. This slide provides a view of the allocation of those dollars ranked by priority in terms of our commitments to others and the debt service of the board, as well as the distribution to the modes. There are several other legislative recommendations in the governor's proposed budget bill. The recommendation continues this session that was not adopted last session, requiring the board to provide at least $200 million of funds to TPOF off the top in the 6-year planning period. For this purpose, we have taken that amount and withheld $50 million from distribution in fiscal years 26 through 29 for these current assumptions, while that proposal is under consideration. He has also proposed $20 million in general fund recommended for TPOF. We have not picked that up and assumed it for programming purposes until the General Assembly is complete. He's also recommended $70 million in general fund dollars for I-81 for the northbound widening lane project, mile marker 116 to 128 in Salem District.
Ms. Stanton?
Just one question. I haven't seen or don't remember seeing TPOF before. Can somebody give me a brief explanation of what?
Yes, sir. We've had some information on that, but the TPOF is the Transportation Partnership Opportunity Fund. Over the last couple years, we have been attempting and successfully in some to use that fund a little bit more, a little differently than in the past, and to have more funds in it. And basically, what it allows us to do, Mr. Stant, is it allows us to go work on transportation projects that are associated with some sort of substantial economic development project in a hurry. All right? It's hurry money. It's fast money. So we find something, the Secretary of Commerce and myself need to weigh in on it, and then we make recommendations to the governor. In our last meeting, we dedicated $20 million out of the TPOF fund in a vote here last December to go towards construction of the pad at Wallops Island. So we voted for that. That's the kind of thing that we can use it for, but we can also use it for, you know, we've got some sort of great economic development opportunity that comes in, and you know our cycle, Mr. Stan, it just takes so long to get there. This gives us some quick money with sort of everybody's in, and but so much, the governor has to go get additional permission. But if it's at a certain level, he can do it with our recommendation. So that's what it is. Thank you. Ms. Farmer.
Switching to VDOT program updates, we continue to monitor our paving needs as well as the contractual commitments expected to meet our performance targets. And so these assumptions provide a one-time additional allocation for VDOT's maintenance program of $120 million. And we have a corresponding share to localities of $27.7 million. We'll continue to monitor through our contract awards in these upcoming weeks to ensure that the funding we have set aside will be sufficient for the commitments. However, there is the potential for a recommendation for an additional amount of funding that will be needed to cover the maintenance commitments. We'll provide that update to you when the draft budget is presented in April, just to give you some understanding about what those needs may be.
You know, we'll battle this forever, folks. The pull and back and forth between maintenance and construction, and of course, the more that we build, the more we drive the maintenance number up. But we're committed here at the Commonwealth, and certainly this board has shown its commitment over the years to ensure that we do the proper maintenance of our system, that it's safe, that it's clean, that it works well. And so we're going to continue to do that. It's a difficult because it's costly to do that, and certainly we're not going to have roads paved with diamonds. But we want them to be safe, we want them to be clean, we want them to work right, for pavement to be right, bridges to be right, and so forth. And so we'll continue to focus on that, and that's got to come first. That's our mantra, is that we take care of what we have, and then with what we have left, we can enhance what we have, build more. So we're very focused on not shortchanging our maintenance. This board has set targets and goals, and I'm serious about achieving the targets and goals that the board has adopted. And if we're not going to be serious about it, then we shouldn't set them. And if we're going to set them, then we ought to get serious about them, and that's what we are. So that comes first for us, and it will continue to. Dr. Smoot.
Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir. Dr. Smoot.
Laura, is the inflation rate an annualized number?
Yes, sir. We get CPI information from the Department of Tax to use as our source to grow. And yes, I believe they have quarterly details that are annualized.
Right, but the 2.3 is not for the period, it's the annualized rate within the period, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Sellers?
Is there a delta between what is allocated for maintenance and what is needed for maintenance with these contracts? And do we monitor that?
Are we underfunding the contracts? Is that what you're saying?
Not underfunding the contracts, but are we funding the maintenance program?
We are funding the maintenance programs. We have not reached all our targets. We continue to strive for those, and we continue to allocate funds as we think is necessary to get to those targets. But we don't get there overnight either. And as you know, our targets have changed as we've looked at cusps and other things and sort of moved around. But it's a continual give and take between how much, what is the right target. As I said, we're never going to have and shouldn't have highways paved with diamonds, and we certainly do not. But they need to be safe, they need to be clean, they need to be well-maintained. And so that's in the eye of the beholder, right? How much of that? You know, what is the paving target? What is the bridge target? What is all that? And so as that moves back and forth, the numbers move back and forth. But it's a constant give and take between maintenance and construction. But we're committed to ensure that the maintenance is done properly and that we reach our targets and that they're safe and that they're clean and that they're well maintained. That's our policy as a board. Farmer.
In terms of stepping into the assumptions for highway construction programs, each year revenue sharing is sized for this period. The amount of funds provided for revenue sharing is $100 million annually, and that is the cap, I believe, in code language. The High Priority Projects Program also has an off-the-top allocation to the ITTF, or Innovative Technology Transportation Fund, that is set at $25 million a year. And then the district grant program, off the top of it, each district share, based on the amount of unpaid roads in the district. Each district has a deduction from their share of the $25 million for unpaid roads before the district grant amount is determined by district. So I'm just going to walk through the next series of slides just to demonstrate the anticipated funding for each of these construction programs based on the formula distribution and then their change over prior assumptions. So the first slide up is state of good repair. It receives 30% of the funds available for construction. Just to walk through, the difference is higher in the first year, primarily due to the impact of the funding provided for maintenance and the city street payments in year one. And then there are small minor adjustments in the previous, in the years that overlap from the previous assumptions. And then you see 2030 come into the picture. So the difference from previous assumptions across the full 6 years is $440 million. Similar structure for the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program, or IOEP, receives 20% of the available funding. We also have a formula prescribed as to how we distribute the funds. Aside from the fuel tax available for I-81, after we cover the debt service commitment, which is the top line, that is not a formula perspective, that's just how much fuel tax revenue is left after the debt. The remaining line items represent a formula distribution based on each interstate's share of truck vehicle miles traveled. And so this is the assumed distribution to the interstates and the differences from the previous assumptions. In terms of highway safety, same level of detail here on the safety allocation. There's also a further distribution within the safety program to both behavioral strategies that DMV has come to you all with before, as well as strategies that VDOT deploys on highways. In terms of the Smart Scale program funds, High Priority Projects program, and the 20%, this provides the change year over year. So bringing in 2030, the difference between last year and this year would be $268.4 million. When we walk forward to another Smart Scale round for next year, round 6, you'll see 2030 and 2031 will have the bulk of the funding available for Smart Scale. And this also reserves the $25 million in the last year for ITTF. This slide provides a view of the district grant program and the changes between its formula share as well as the supplemental district grant program funding that is received from fuel tax revenue in some districts. It also removes the unpaved allocation in the last year and just provides a view of what those expected changes will be. That's the complete picture of the construction program. In terms of our next steps, we'll continue to monitor the General Assembly session and how it impacts transportation funding and spending. There are several smaller items that may impact staffing costs at the department as well as across other state agencies. In addition to all of the items the Secretary discussed earlier related to commitments of the general fund and the governor's tax policy. In terms of future updates, we're also monitoring the federal activity. We still wait on a full year of obligation from Congress. In addition, August redistribution has become quite a bear for the department to handle, and so we're watching that. They have calculated the expected share, and we may have to revisit our federal revenue to maximize the department's potential, but that work is still underway. And so as those assumptions may change, I will provide an update to you.
To that end, last year, the VDOT folks did some Herculean efforts to get some stuff allocated. You'll recall we talked about that previously, but as the federal situation was changing, we needed to move some money quickly and allocate it and get it spent, if you will, so for fear that it may get clawed back. And we did a lot of work over a very short period of time, over a weekend and nights, and saved the Commonwealth a bunch of money that we may have lost otherwise. So that's what she's referencing, and thank you very much for what y'all did.
Ms. Secretary?
Yes, sir, Mr. Merrill.
Thanks, Ms. Farmer. Just make sure I'm clear, on these last slides that you show, the operation improvement, the high priority projects, and the district grant, that is all for construction. None of that is maintenance, right?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Secretary,
Yes, sir.
just a question.
Mr.
While
Yates.
we're on revenues and expenses and budget projections, I have been reading a lot about the sports complex potential one in Northern Virginia, and they've thrown out a number of $200 million they want from VDOT. I think that's correct. I'm just curious, is that included in any of this, or is there any, are we too premature on that, or just where would some of that funding come possibly?
You know, we're working through this with the General Assembly, but the $200 million number was the number that was identified for transportation improvement projects associated with this project in this corridor. The $200 million was a number that was going to be shared between the city of Alexandria and the Commonwealth of Virginia, not entirely the Commonwealth's responsibility. That $200 million numbers that we have, we felt was sufficient to cover the incremental needs that would be required for this project. We are, there's some money that we already have that would not come from some other place, but would come out of that corridor that would help us with that. We are in detailed, let me rephrase that, we're working very diligently and very hard over the next couple weeks to sort of refine where we are and to have a better ability to show some of that to the legislators. And so, no, that's not in here. And if it goes the way that we hope it wouldn't change any of this.
That's good news.
So we're not, there was no intention to go take 200 million out of somewhere else. The number was not 200. 200 was the total between the city and the Commonwealth. That was a shared responsibility. But hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you, and.
And I will
good
say
luck.
this, as long as we're talking about it, I've been intimately involved in this, as you can imagine. It's, it happened relatively quickly. The opportunity, we're all under non-disclosure agreements. We couldn't talk about anything. We literally didn't have anything to talk about until December and moved very quickly after that. As you can imagine, it takes us a lot longer than a month or so to try to get detailed down in the dirt on actually exactly how everything will look and exactly how much everything will cost. But we had a high degree of confidence going in, and we're continuing to refine that and feel confident about where we are. The Commissioner and Director DeBrule have been intimately involved in trying to help us understand that, working with our colleagues in Northern Virginia and others, and so we're excited about it. I will tell you that as a business guy in government, as I've looked at this opportunity, it is extremely unusual in that it is really a unique opportunity for the Commonwealth. There is no cash into this deal. There's no upfront cash by the Commonwealth. There is some transportation funding, as I've indicated, but other than that, and that's already sort of in the works, and we're looking at money that we've already programmed and how we would move that or look at that differently. But at the end of the day, there's about $4 billion in free cash that comes to the Commonwealth on zero cash invested. And the risk is extremely minimal. And so from my perspective, purely as a business guy, I've looked at this and said, oh my goodness, this is a great opportunity. And it's not just for Northern Virginia, it's for the Commonwealth. Alexandria has similar numbers. The free cash that flows out of this is substantial. And I think something that's really important for folks, and our job here is not to be point on this, but we're pretty close to that. If this deal doesn't happen, then what will happen there is a redevelopment of that mall, that strip mall, if you will, with Target, because that's the reason that a lot of this had to happen fast. Was the developer had to give notice to the current occupants there by December in order to start the process where this could happen. If they didn't do that, it was gone, and the lease would have been re-upped, and it would have continued that way. If it had continued that way, we'd have probably seen about 25% of the funds that we will get from this different project. And so while the other project would have been good, it wouldn't be near as good as what this can do for the community there, as well as for the Commonwealth at large. So it's a really great opportunity, not just sort of the whiz-bang part of having sports teams and so forth, but the real financial impact is huge in a positive way with very little risk and with no cash in the deal. And that's just unique. You just don't see that. So that's why we're so excited about it. The transportation component it has challenges, of course. It's a corridor of congestion, some of congestion, a lot of people there, and there's a lot going on. But we got a really good team. We're digging in deep, and I'm confident that we're going to have a great plan that will make sure that corridor functions properly, whether it's Sunday morning at 6 a.m. or it's Friday night at a game at 7 o'clock. And so that's what we're working on now. It's just a really great opportunity for the Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Ms. Farmer?
That concludes my budget presentation. If there are any additional questions, I can take those. If not, I will move on to the next item.
Thank you. Interstate 66 inside the Beltway. Ms. Farmer?
Yes, sir. So I'm providing an update on the funding distribution requirements of the Interstate 66 Inside the Beltway facility and just its performance to date and some recommendations for the board to consider next month. So a bit of background, by way of a memorandum of agreement between VDOT, DRPT, the board and Northern Virginia Transportation Commitment. We have entered into agreement related to the treatment of revenues on 66 inside the Beltway and their use. The board has considered amendments to this MOA 3 times since it was put into place in 2015. They're listed there in each year. There's some highlighted aspects on the slide related to the agreement and its amendments. It permitted the Commonwealth to use toll revenues for debt service and pay-go expenses for the rail components that include Long Bridge and Roslyn Metro. As VPRA has brought budgetary updates to you all each year, they've included some commitment from I-66. It also provides NVTC a minimum payment of $10 million a year with a 2.5% escalation for their commuter choice program. They also bring those project selections to the board for consideration. And provides an additional $5 million a year with an escalation to the commission for their commuter choice program from the annual transit monies that come from I-66 Express Mobility Partners, or the outside the Beltway facility, and that began in 2022. The agreement also outlines a waterfall on the treatment of toll revenues on the facility, and I would like to highlight that today and how we need to incorporate that in the current year budget. So the waterfall requires an application of the toll revenues in the following manner. It covers reasonable costs and expenses of the facility for the O&M of tolling. Second is any debt service on the rail components of the facility. No debt has been taken out for the rail components. Today, that would be Commonwealth Transportation Board debt, and so we're just in the beginning stages of working on that with VPRA and the department, and when the timing of that is best for the components as well as the facility. So step 2 has no commitments yet. Step 3 is the NVTC payment each year. Again, is $10 million that increases 2.5% each year. 4 is pay-go for rail components. And what that means is just cash derived in the facility that is not supporting debt. For Long Bridge, expected construction between 22 and 2034. Following that is repayments of certain amounts to the toll facility's revolving account. So when we put tolling in place on 66, we used a loan from the toll facility's revolving fund to put that technology in place and begin its operations, and so that has a debt to the facility. 6th is any debt service on NVTC debt that they have taken out, and then subject to limitations, they have yet to do that as well. And any additional repayments with the limitations in step 5, if there are any additional repayments to toll facility revolving, they come in step 7. And then if there's ultimately any remaining revenues applied, those are for components selected by NVTC and then would be approved by the board. So these are the 8 steps in the waterfall. To date, due to the facility's performance and this MOA in place, we have not placed this waterfall in the VDOT budget details. And so the recommended action that we'd like to present to you is including an amendment to our annual budget and its details, which has an appendix for each toll facility that VDOT operates, that outlines this waterfall. And so we would like to bring forward a revision to the current year to note the anticipated waterfall and the expected revenue of the facility. And then we would begin to incorporate that waterfall in each subsequent annual budget adopted by the board. This slide just provides some detail on the components of the budget. The $32.5 million represents the amount that was in the budget approved by the board in June. And then the uses would be outlined here. Estimated about $9.5 million for our O&M commitments on the facility. There's no current debt service. Step 3 is the scheduled payment to NVTC according to the schedule. And then pay-go commitments for rail components at about $10.8 million, and then beginning repayment for the toll facilities revolving at $1.5. So next month, we will bring to you an action to outline this waterfall and the need to adopt it based on the MOA. I'd like to also talk about the facility's performance. And so as you can imagine, I-66 inside the Beltway is a commuter traffic. It tolls in peak directions. And in 2021, after the COVID fall off, traffic volumes began to slowly come back. But the primary user of the facilities was toll-paying solo drivers. In 2022, We saw increased usage, but it continued to be those coming back over time. This next slide provides just a view of the revenue collections quarterly on the facility since fiscal year 2018, and some highlighted notes about what happened related to the facility. So it notes the COVID-19 drop-off in March 2020. We also widened the facility eastbound, and that came online in December of 2020. And then later in the period, we went HOV3 to correspond with 66 outside the Beltway in December of 2022, just over a year ago. And then the performance quarterly of the revenue on the facility. And so I just want to highlight the third and fourth quarters of fiscal year 2023 greatly outperformed expectations. They outperformed the budget that the board had adopted, and the planned waterfall was not in place. So as I mentioned, traffic volumes and the associated revenue did not allow for the anticipated payments to be made for NVTC. The budgets in 21 and 22, we had adjusted based on what we knew about what happened to the facility and the expectations related to the payment we anticipated to make to the facility based on our adjusted expectations. And then the facility outperformed expectations for really a 6-month period of time beginning in December 2022. And so the table at the bottom highlights the anticipated payments to Northern Virginia Transportation Commitment totaling $30.8 million over the period. We had adopted budgets in 21 and 22 with reduced expectations based on what we were seeing with the facility. So those, along with the reset in 23 to the scheduled payment of $16.9 million, and then actual payments to NVTC over this period were $13.3. Last June, due to meeting the facility's expectations as well as the gangbuster performance it had in the last 6 months of the year, VDOT advanced $13 million to the Rail Authority based on pay-go funding for rail commitments. However, this was not outlined in a waterfall adopted by the board. And so based on this, we believe NVTC is owed $16.6 million based on any remaining revenues and the budgeted transfer. And so our solution to satisfy this commitment to NVTC and relieve the toll facility of any debt to the commission going forward, there are available funds from 66 outside the Beltway's concession arrangements for transit. And so we would like to provide these funds through DRPT, amending their program in the current year to cover this commitment to NVTC, and then update the budget details in 2024 to include this anticipated waterfall, and then require that waterfall going forward.
Thank you. So let me just sort of boil this down because it's a lot of information. So we didn't hit some revenue numbers, and we didn't pay out the funds in a couple of years to MVTC that we would have paid out if we had done that. And we didn't do a catch-up, and we think we should have done a catch-up according to our MOA. So basically, we're coming back now and saying, okay, if we'd done it or done the catch-up, this is what they would have received. That didn't happen a couple years ago. Director DeBrule was able to help us out and find some ability to help fund that. It's sort of no harm to what she's otherwise doing. And so the concept is we would meet the commitment that we believe we have, that we didn't understand until somewhat recently, and then we would do it in this way, so it wouldn't have any impact otherwise on these streams. Is that fair enough, Ms. Farmer?
Sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you. I'm curious, to what do we attribute the outperformance? Is it a volume, or is it increase in tolls, or is it a combination?
The 6-month period and the continued performance of the facility is primarily due to those folks who just had 2 passengers now have to have 3 for free travel. So we do believe there's conversion to folks paying a toll that weren't before, but also the recovery just in general on traffic into and out of the district at peak periods is having an impact on the facility. So the more the federal government opens and expects their employees at work that were traveling in by car, that's generally what we're attributing the performance of the facility to.
It's not the topic, but I'm just curious, outside the Beltway 66, have we outperformed estimates, or are we on track with whatever the revenue was estimated to be?
I don't think I've received annual reports on that, Mr. Lawson, but we can definitely check into that and get back to you.
Ms. Ellers?
Part of this revenue projection, is it the fees that are attached to some of these tolls? And let me expand upon this. I do use the hot lanes. And here lately, I've been getting, myself and I've received quite a few phone calls on it. Why all of a sudden am I getting a bill instead of it reading the Easy Pass? And it's sending fees, administrative fees. Does the Commonwealth get that back in any way? I've received 3 in the last 6 months, and I've talked to others.
Which road?
95.
Okay, so we're
And they're
not on
saying
66,
it's not
we're on
reading the
95.
Easy Pass. And so they'll send you a bill,
Tell
and
me,
then it has,
Press lane's on 95.
and then it'll have a fee associated with it for administration.
Do we get the fee? No, we don't get the fee.
Okay, it's
That's
just
a
something.
contractor thing.
And then another question is this NVTC money, they can use that to help offset some of the costs for smart scale projects, I'm assuming, when they put in.
I'll let Director DeBrule answer.
So this is completely separate from Smart Scale. So this is funding, transit capital projects, operations in the 66 corridor. So their use of it is very limited. It's not really something that's going into a Smart Scale project.
Okay, so it's not just going to NVTC to help them offset the costs of whatever projects, mostly in HPP, because that offset is so big, or
No,
could be so
the
big.
MOA is very strictly constructed on how they can use the funds. Once they go through their project prioritization process, which is a technical process, it's reviewed by DRPT, and also the Office of the Attorney General for compliance with the MOA and the code. And then we incorporate those projects into our 6-year program, and they're approved by this board. But they're very different from Smart Scale.
Mr. Secretary,
Absolutely, yes, sir.
is the recommendation to use outside the Beltway funding in FY 24, or is it to use it in each year of the 6-year improvement program going forward? Just one.
Dr. Smith, there's two components. The MOA with NVTC provides $5 million a year over time out of the 66 outside the Beltway concession payment to NVTC for commuter choice. The rest of that concession or transit payment from outside the Beltway comes to DRPT, and we allocate those funds. So that's one thing that we see that happens each and every year. The $16.6 million to NVTC is a one-time adjustment that we'll make in the fiscal year 24 6-year improvement program. So we'll be here next month to amend our 6-year program while Laura amends the budget for VDOT. And that's a one-time fix that just brings us all back to the payment schedule that's in the MOA.
Thank you.
I think, just to be clear, there was confusion along the way or disagreement as to whether there might have needed to be a catch-up or whether each year stood on its own. And when we looked at it, we determined ultimately that there needed to be a catch-up. So historically, or the last couple of years, we didn't do that. Each year stood on its own. You either got it or you didn't. And so now we're looking at it differently as we dug into it. So this is a one-time allocation to meet the requirement of the catch-up, and then we're even again. And thankfully, Director DeBrule had a lever that she could pull that made sense, and so she's provided that. So we would accept the $16.6 million and take it from the DRPT and move it over and be done with it and move on. One time, finished. It's a bill that we didn't understand we owed, and then we understand we owed it, so we're paying it. Fair enough? Is that correct, Ms. Farmer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is item number 4, progress on development of measures for V-Trans objectives. Margie Ray. Good morning, Ms. Ray. And Mr. Lawson. Morning to you too, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I just wanted to kick this off very quickly, and I'll turn this over to Margie and to Jatender. As you recall, at least all except a few of you that are newer, we started talking about VTrans in that process update early last year. We spent several sessions talking about the vision, the mission, the goals, and the objectives. And as we've kind of worked our way through the process, we've now kind of reached a place where we've kind of got Smart Scale behind us, and we're kind of refocusing now to finish up the work that we were doing on VTrans. And the last thing was presented to you were the objectives, and then what we were due to come back to you with were the measures associated with those objectives, so we could track them, follow them, make sure know whether or not we were accomplishing what we're after. So today, Margie and Jatender will be kind of bringing back to you kind of a refresher of what the objectives are. There's a couple minor changes that we're recommending to those objectives as we worked through the measures we felt like they were needed. So that will be discussed, and they'll be highlighted as we get to each of those objectives. So that's the part one of VTrans today will be the discussion around these objectives and measures that we'll be seeking your adoption of, I think, next month. And then we're going to take a next step and with a second presentation, and we'll be talking about what are considered the midterm needs, which are the kind of the needs that are used in determining whether a project gets screened in or screened out in terms of a smart scale effort. So that's just a really quick tee up to the presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Margie and Jatender.
And Mr. Lawson, if you will, VTrans is like the 50,000-foot view of what we're trying to accomplish in transportation in Virginia. And it's really important because it frames everything we do. And so to John's point, we had a vision we looked at, we had some guiding principles and some goals that we looked at, and it all flows down from there, if you will. And so one of the criteria for smart scale, for example, is does it meet a VTrans need? If it doesn't meet a VTrans need, it's out. It doesn't get considered, because VTrans is sort of the overarching umbrella that says this is what we're going to do. These are our guiding principles. This is our vision, our guiding principles, and our goals. Here are objectives. Here are how we'll measure those. To an earlier meeting, we talked about measurements and how do we measure, and so we're bringing that back in here today to talk about some of that. So, Ms. Ray? Thank you, Ms. Lawson.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I'm going to jump right into it, and then Jatender's here if we have any questions, because a couple slides touch a little bit more on the things he's been presenting to you. But as Deputy Secretary Lawson just indicated, you all have seen multiple presentations from Jatender focusing on development of the new vision, guiding principles, goals, and most recently the objectives. And so today I'm focusing a little bit more on introducing measures to go along with those objectives, as well as some minor tweaks to a few of the objectives, and then Jatender will talk about the midterm needs policy. So when we look at kind of how you all have been proceeding through VTrans, today's focus still remains on that first pillar, looking at those guiding principles, goals, and objectives, and the vision, and then Jatender will be shifting us to the next phase. But before we did that and really kind of jumped into it, you see kind of the vision of where we're going with VTrans. That's a cycle as well. But really, we wanted to bring this all together. This was something that the Secretary had some interest in looking at how this all relates. You guys get lots of different presentations, and how does this all fit? So we start at the top there with our VTrans, the new vision, guiding principles, goals, and objectives that you all will adopt. There are other planning documents that help inform that process. We can just see a highlight here of like State Rail Plan, the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and again, sometimes you hear presentations about some of these things. These are how we do some planning processes, really looking at kind of that long-term effort to move forward. Over to the right on that slide gets to that midterm needs policy. So taking from those planning documents, identifying where the problems are. Moving down to where we have the develop component, that's where we start studying solutions, potential solutions to the needs of those problems that have been identified. So we do that usually through the project pipeline, which is focusing on the priority locations out of the midterm needs analysis. We have the arterial management program, STARS, and then there are other programs also that may help us help inform solutions. Down at the bottom, we invest. We have multiple funding programs that we go through. You guys have spent a lot of time this last year looking at Smart Scale as one of the major funding programs and the prioritization process that we go through to identify what we should invest in. The programs that are listed here, again, not all inclusive, all of those have some level of a prioritization process so that it helps inform our decision making. Moving to the left of the circle there, focusing on what I'm going to talk a little bit more about today is, we need to have the measures to help monitor how we're doing and are we going to achieve those goals and objectives that have been defined. And then we are able to start course correcting as we look at that. But we have different mechanisms by which we report out to you all on how we are performing. And so we use that information to kind of keep that cycle going. So just kind of what we're calling now the transportation investment cycle. So jumping into the actual measures, I'll give a little framework here. So this is the way all the slides are looking. The top of it phrases the goal that you all have already seen. The draft objectives to go along with each of those goals is listed on the left, and draft performance or proposed performance measures are listed on the right. If there's a suggested change to an objective, it's either using strike through or underlining, and so it'll be pretty clear on where we are with that. There's multiple slides for each of the goal areas, just given the number of measures so that we can expand on this information. But focusing on the first goal area is really looking at our safety component. So we want to reduce the fatalities and serious injuries on our transportation network. So we look at both the highway, rail, transit, things like that. So on this first slide here, our measures related to the highway side of reducing fatalities, serious injuries, and our non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. These are measures you all have seen before. We come to you annually with proposing targets because these are required from a federal perspective. They're also linked very closely to the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. You all in the last 2 years have adopted annual targets based on an aspirational target to help achieve the objectives of that Strategic Highway Safety Plan. So these are ones that you all have seen and used before. The next one are more transit-related. Again, all of these are federally required, but to help reduce the fatalities and serious injuries in our transit systems, again, federally required. These are not ones that we've brought to you all before, but we do report out on them. The transit agencies are the ones who are responsible for setting their targets and reporting on performance. So you can see here the draft objective for A3, there is a suggestion for a modification to better tie this to existing plans and targets that are being set so that we have something to measure against. Moving to system preservation, goal B, so we want to provide a well-maintained and managed transportation infrastructure and services. So B1 is focusing on our pavements and bridges, as well as our special structures and some of the routine best practices. The measures over to the right are measures, except for one, are ones that you all have seen before. Kevin Gregg presented to you back in October an annual report out of how we're performing against targets that the board has adopted relative to that maintenance and operations comprehensive review back in 2019. So looking more at the transit side and the rail side, again, some slight modifications to Objective B2 that is focusing on targets where they exist and really trying to tie back to that performance. And so what we have on to the right are some measures that are related to the equipment and the facilities managed by transit agencies. The first measure are part of a group plan that the transit agencies have to utilize. DRPT organizes and helps develop that so that this TAM plan, Transportation Asset Management Plan, helps guide and directs the transit agencies in their performance. And they have to report out on that to FTA. The second one is also a reporting requirement to the FTA, and it really gets into the transit asset condition, similar to how we do pavements and bridges. Things are rated through this term scale. And, if it's not meeting a certain level, it is something that we'd want to improve on. The last one then gets to how we're investing and making sure that we are allocating our funding appropriately to the state of good repair projects in transit. Objective B3 is looking at our rail track miles and maintaining those to a certain level, and we'll use a measure to monitor how well we're doing against that investment. Goal C gets to congestion and travel time reliability. We want to look at congestion as one of the key components here. How do we start improving our congestion? We're using measures that we report out in some other ways. Some of these are reported out in regular reports that our office is responsible for. And so we're looking at how do we affect congested conditions. Not everywhere is congested. How do we invest and focus on those congested conditions? Changes in the travel time index. How long is it taking us to get places? Are we improving that? Ridership, so that we're looking at a statewide level, are we improving ridership? One of our goals and ways to help improve congestion is to move some cars off the road, and so we want to be monitoring that ridership level to see how we're doing. The second one there, a modification to the measure, the objective, is to just make sure that we're focusing our efforts on those key corridors, but really at critical times and locations. It's not something necessarily that is of concern everywhere, so focusing those efforts. And so we can look at our passenger on-time performance, that's Amtrak and VRE, and then also looking at another measure that is a federally required measure, and transit agencies adopt their targets, and that's that mean distance between failures. Right? So staying with congestion and reliability, a component that we wanted to, an objective that was defined is improving our freight throughput. And some of the measures we want to use to monitor that is looking at our interstate truck travel time reliability index. That's a federally required measure. You all also adopt a target for that requirement. We also look at where bottlenecks are occurring and the severity, and we can monitor and track those. Another component is improving our at-grade railroad crossings to improve our freight movement. We also want to look at transit efficiency and effectiveness. So again, a change to the objective here is to focus on some of the existing plans that exist. I said that. And making sure that we're tying our measures to where those guidance and measures and things like that are captured. So we're looking at our total passenger miles by revenue hour, the cost per revenue hour per mile per trip, changes in access by transit. And again, some of these are measures that we've already been using within some of our reporting frameworks. So objective D, or goal D, is interconnected systems and services. So how do we improve our integrated multimodal transportation system? Objective D1 is looking at multimodal redundancy within key corridors. And the measures that we're looking at, these are all new, and really looking at alternate routes within a corridor, how many passenger modes might be available within a corridor, looking at our active transportation as another way to help improve our multimodal access, and then some of the commodity movement that helps us understand what's happening on the networks. For Objective D2, where we look at cybersecurity, we are working through and trying to develop a measure. Right now, we don't have something for that. Objective D3 is looking at improving the bus stop conditions and accessibility by implementing the transit modernization study. So with that, we would look at the percentage of bus stops that are being improved with a shelter and the amount of funding that's being invested in that program. All right, continuing with interconnected systems, freight rail movement is important to us, again, for the Port of Virginia, and implementing the statewide rail plan, so we can look at some measures that are tied to those objectives and looking at the kind of overlap with the prior one, but looking at improvements at grade rail crossings, improving the freight bottlenecks, because that can be rail or highway. And then also looking at a number of new carloads that are generated through DRPT's freight program. And that's really designed to improve our infrastructure investments in Virginia's freight network. Objective D is looking at regionally significant economic development initiatives. And so we start looking at how long does it take us to travel between corridors from business-ready sites, where we might be adding some new industrial rail spurs, and new jobs as a result of rail industrial access projects. Environmental stewardship, Goal E, looking at context-sensitive transportation solutions. Objective E1, some modifications here to remove some language but then add some other. And so we're looking at the number of projects that are actually providing context-sensitive solutions to our transportation challenges, and then looking at the environmental reviews that are applied. Also within Goal E is implementing solutions to make sure that we're meeting the national ambient air quality standards. On the right, the measures that are proposed here are measures that we have reported on pretty regularly, at least every other year. And so looking at our own on-road mobile source criteria pollutants, which is also a federally required measure in Northern Virginia, and you all have adopted targets for that. We also have some that help us understand what's happening with moving vehicles off the road, so looking at non-single occupancy vehicle travel, vehicle miles traveled per capita. We also look at the alternative fueled vehicles and transit rolling stock that might be powered with alternative fuels. So that was a lot of measures, but these are all related to the objectives that you all have seen before with those modifications, and are things that we will be looking to monitor and report back on eventually. Any questions?
Dr. Smoot.
Mr. Secretary, so in order to be considered for smart scale, the project has to meet at least one of these goals. Is that correct? Or address one of these goals?
Has to meet a need. Yes, sir.
Yes, but the needs that come out of the midterm needs analysis through VTrans, and I should bring Jitendra up
That's
here.
what it means.
It's the VTrans needs.
So
And
the needs are going to be a subset of this,
they'll be
Okay.
tied to these.
right? And they'll be more illustrative, if you will. But so we start with the vision, guiding principles, goals, objectives, measures, and needs will flow out of that. And if you go back to your second page, you'll see on page 3, it's actually page 3. Go back to page 3, please. You can see, there you go. You can see we will identify midterm needs there as well, priority locations. So as long as the projects meet one of those needs, then it's eligible.
And this is for the upcoming round of smart scale? The immediately upcoming round of smart scale?
No, because we're developing, go ahead, John, you jump in there.
As the Secretary explained, the goals and objectives are kind of what we're trying to accomplish. The needs are the way you accomplish them. So what we're talking about now what the next discussion will be what those midterm needs are. They are the midterm needs that will be used for round 6.
6.
But to be clear and not to steal Jitendra's thunder, we're not really changing the needs other than updating the data that determines the needs. And his presentation will be more explicit about that.
So these will be available to local governments and others who wish to request round 6 smart scale projects?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And the next presentation, which we will likely do after our break for lunch, because it'll be about another 30 minutes unless y'all want to just keep going forward, we'll get more into that detail, Dr. Smoot.
Thank you.
Questions? Yes, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I don't know if many people had seen the article that appeared in the local Virginia Pilot, but it addressed concerns about congestion trains going onto the terminals in the Hampton Roads area. And it didn't have any solutions, recommendations, but I was wondering if this is something you're aware of, or if we're involved in trying to either influence the railroads to the hours of operation to where they're not in the middle of rush hour traffic, running across and blocking traffic for 15 or 20 minutes.
Yes and yes.
Okay.
We are aware of it, and we are working on it. And I've talked to some of the railroads and others. Yeah, Mr. Coleman, this isn't really apt, so I probably shouldn't say it, but it's like no good deed goes unpunished. When the port stepped forward to help us with trains going in and out of the port, which were an issue, we created an app, as you probably know, that Hampton Roads residents can get messaging when that train is going to be there and potentially blocking Hampton Boulevard, which is a major thoroughfare, off a terminal. And we were able to implement that because we were the port and we had somebody had to open the gate, right? And because when we had somebody that had to open the gatekeeper, if you will, tells us when the train's coming, not the train, right? And so now, because that's been successful, of course, then people are like, well, how do I get that for Ward's Corner? Or how do I get it for here or there or somewhere else? There's no gatekeeper, right? There's no gate to open. And so the railroad's aware of this, the railroads, Norfolk Southern in this case, who I've talked with, and there's some technology out there that might allow this to work at different places as well. And so the whole concept, one, there's like, what are the rules and what are you allowed to do and what should you be allowed to do? And then the other is communication. So the part I'm talking about right now is communication. There's some legislation that's been introduced this session as well that we'll work through. But yes, we are aware of that. And yes, we are talking to the railroads. And yes, we are trying to ensure that the traveling public is not inconvenienced more than they will. You know, a lot of this goes back to railroad law and all sorts of things that Mr. Stant's probably more familiar with than I will ever be. But
Federal law completely,
yeah, the federal law overrules everything we do,
we can't force the railroad to do anything.
pretty much. But I will tell you that in my conversations with the railroads, they have been interesting in trying to abrogate, to ameliorate the problem, to lessen the problem. So they're sensitive to it. They want to help us, and so we're pursuing that. Yes, sir.
Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Sellers.
with the one on the cybersecurity efforts, it says it's still under development. Is that an in-house? Is there an agency in the Commonwealth that does that?
Yes, ma'am, there is. It's a combination of Secretary of Administration, the Secretary of Public Safety, who gets into the whole cybersecurity world. And yes, we work closely with administration through VITA and with public safety as well. So yes, sir. Yes,
With
ma'am.
it's just very interesting, and this is also on the national level with that critical infrastructure component there. And I'm curious why it's not a standalone, maybe? I mean, it's very important, and considering so much of what we do is on a platform, a network, should it be something of its own? Just to throw that out there.
You mean a goal as opposed to an objective?
Yes, sir, to make it a little bit more of a priority and show folks that we're doing, especially with the port that's continuing to grow, and lots of things that are behind transportation.
You know, I will tell you, it is a priority, and certainly the administration has made it a priority. When we started, it's disconcerting how the world's going as it relates to that, and you know more about that than I do. But it is a priority, so regardless of sort of, this isn't driving the Commonwealth, I promise you. The Commonwealth has their own bigger set of priorities, and it is a priority with the Commonwealth. And they're digging in pretty deeply. It's not a primary role for us, but it's pretty primary that our data's in the same place for us. So, yeah, yes, ma'am.
Well, I'd love to be a part of that, or at least hear it.
Sure.
I'm certainly not a cybersecurity expert, but I know people. and spend a lot of time looking at some of the risks associated with it, and I'm very familiar with some of the national efforts that we have going.
And the truth is, you know, not to scare folks, but we deal with it every day, all day long. People trying to hack into our systems, whether it's VDOT or DRPT or DMV or wherever it is. And we're just vigilant as we can be, and it's a key priority for the state. Thank you. Anyone else? So the next presentation is going to probably take 20, 30 minutes. I think it's probably a good time to break and grab lunch unless y'all disagree. All right, I'm gonna recess us for lunch. We'll bring it back in a bit. Thank you very much. All right, good afternoon. We are in recess from the, did we have a action item agenda? Action. All right, we're in recess before I reopen the meeting. We're in recess of the workshop meeting. We have some folks here who've been here for an hour or more from New Kent County who are here on an action item agenda. And I would like to call us into order for the action meeting and take that agenda item up so that we don't keep them here another hour or 2 hours when it's not necessary. And it's an important item, and I'm really glad they're here. So with that, I'm going to call to order the action agenda, action item, excuse me, the action meeting for January 16th for the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and ask Mr. Robbie Prezioso to come forward and address action item number 3, action on the commemorative naming of the section of Interstate 64 within New Kent County from the James City County line and Henrico County line within the Richmond District as the, quote, Patricia A. Page Memorial Highway, unquote. Mr. Prezioso.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I'm pleased to bring to you this action item today. As the Secretary mentioned, this is the commemorative naming of a section of I-64 in New Kent County. It goes from the James City County line all the way to the Henrico County line, and this would be the Patricia A. Page Memorial Highway. The New Kent County Board of Supervisors passed a resolution on December 11th of last year to honor the life and faithfulness and the dedication to the citizens of New Kent County of the Honorable Miss Page. In a letter dated December 14th, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority expressed its endorsement of the New Kent County resolution. And additionally, in a letter, December 14th, the Richmond Regional Planning Commission also expressed its endorsement. So we have a community-wide endorsement of this. According to the New Kent County resolution, Ms. Page of Lenexa, Virginia, was first elected to the New Kent County Board of Supervisors in November 2015, and she served 2 terms, approximately 8 years, until her passing in 2023. She was a remarkable person and dedicated public servant who devoted her time, talent, and really towards the betterment of the folks in the community in the New Kent region. Additionally, she was a very strong advocate for the widening of the 29-mile stretch of I-64 through James City and through New Kent County from Henrico County to James City County. And again, we have the county administrator and a couple of the board members here from New Kent as well.
Thank you, Mr. Prezioso. Today, we're joined by Mr. Rodney Hathaway, who's the county administrator from New Kent. We also have Ms. Amy Pearson and Mr. John Moyer, who are both members of the Board of Supervisors in New Kent. Let me just say a few words, and I don't know if you all want to address us, and we'd be happy to hear from you if you'd like to. I got to know Ms. Page a few years ago, and a remarkable lady, I would say. She was insatiable about her advocacy for the GAP and many other things in New Kent County. And she was just a delightful person who was quiet but unrelenting, I would say. And she made it very clear what she was looking to get to help her community. And so it's particularly nice when we cut the ribbon, when the governor cut the ribbon just a short time ago, that she was able to be there. But it was late in her life, and she's gone now. So this is really, sorry, it's a little tough for me. She's a fine lady, but Robbie, if you'll take it from here. I think we have a motion, or excuse me, we have a resolution. Would you all like to speak at all, or are you're good, Mr. Hathaway? Okay. You're welcome. So this resolution is to name the Patricia A. Page Memorial Highway as that piece of the Route 29 Gap project. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Davis moves. Mr. Coleman seconds. Is there further discussion? I would like you to join me in rising to affirm our acceptance of this. Thank you very much. Wonderful lady. Thank you all very much for honoring her and for allowing us to honor her. And the commissioner said the roads are clear back to New Kent. He's got them fully brined and they're ready to rock and roll. So y'all, you're invited to remain, but if you need to go, just know your journey home will be safe. Thank you very much for all that you do. So with that, I appreciate your indulgence. I'm going to recess the action meeting and call back into order the workshop meeting. So the next item on our workshop agenda, excuse me, that's appropriate, is the policy to identify V-Trans midterm needs. Jitender, please join us. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Chair, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Margie Ray presented the first half of the presentation, so I'm trying to cover the second half. So just for an overview, VTrans is the Virginia statewide transportation plan. You all have been involved in the development of vision, goals, and principles. That's the pillar that you see on the left side, the leftmost pillar. Now, Margie Ray presented the measures, and next month we are planning to come back to you all for action on the vision, guiding principles, goals, and objectives. So with that, we are also ready to move on to the next steps in the development of statewide transportation plan. Dr. Smoot already alluded to the question related to the transportation needs. So I'm here to talk to you about the policy to identify transportation needs. These transportation needs that get used for smart scale and revenue sharing program, and provide you with an overview of that. So before I get into the application, how their transportation needs are utilized, let me just state some of the requirements that are in the Code of Virginia. So Code of Virginia states that the Commonwealth Transportation Board, the CTB, will conduct a comprehensive review of statewide transportation multimodal needs for corridors of statewide significance, or referred to as COSS, regional networks, referred to as RN, and urban development areas. And I will explain all of these terms later in the presentation. The code also says that the review shall assess transportation needs and assign them priorities, that they should not be an aggregation of state, local, district, or regional needs. So in other words, we cannot take New River Valley's transportation plan and Northern Virginia's transportation plans for different regions, combine them and make them a statewide transportation plan. And for the purposes of this presentation, which is why I'm here for you, the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment is to assist the CTB. So we are here for you as a staff member working on this, the transportation plan. Now, those were the Code of Virginia requirements. Let me just touch upon some of the policies that CTB has enacted. So CTB is meeting these code requirements by identifying and prioritizing needs. The little map that you see on the upper right corner, those lines, as small as they are, each line represents one or more need that exist. So it might be a transportation demand management need, it might be a congestion need, safety need. So each line that you see on the upper map on the upper left corner has one or more needs. The transportation needs are, in this context, referred to as midterm transportation needs. So I realize that, if we were to conduct an analysis, we can identify transportation needs 50 years out in the future, just like payment and bridge division does. But for the purposes of this exercise, we are focused on transportation needs that need to be addressed over the next 10 years. So, board has established policies to identify these needs using data-driven methods and also prioritize them. Today, we are focusing only on how they are identified, not how they are prioritized, which will come down the road. There is a policy document that describes in much more detail what I'm about to share. So, diving into how the transportation needs are identified, my plan is to walk you through the terms that I used earlier and share with you the schedule that Dr. Smoot inquired about earlier, whether they will be available for next round of Smart Scale, and also use this opportunity to inform some of our stakeholders who might be waiting for these items. So the midterm needs, again, these are, for the sake of simplicity, I will refer to them transportation needs, but they are called midterm needs. They include all modes of transportation, and they are defined into 4 travel markets, 4 trip purposes. So the first one is corridors of statewide significance. So if someone is going from Lynchburg to Fredericksburg, they are going from one region to another, so they are interregional trips. Regional networks, so these are homogeneous areas where someone is going from Chesterfield to downtown Richmond to work, or from, Norfolk to Virginia Beach. They're traveling within a region where most of the travel resides. Urban development areas, they are local trips, so trips within, for example, a downtown area, within a development area, and transportation safety. Now, one thing to keep in mind, these transportation needs are not projects. So when we say that there is a need for congestion, it doesn't necessarily mean that the solution has to be a highway. It could be something else. It could be a VRE line. It could be a program that is run. They are not specific mode and location. So if there is a transportation need for rail service to New River Valley, the solution may lie somewhere in Northern Virginia, for example. So just because we have found a need in New River Valley, it doesn't necessarily mean the solution might reside there. It could be anywhere else. And so, in other words, we want to be specific as to what the problem is. We don't want to be prescriptive as far as what the solution is. That comes from the localities when they're developing smart scale programs and revenue sharing applications. So I used some terms. So if you indulge me, I would like to explain those to you. I used 4 terms, and there are 4 slides corresponding to each of those terms. So one is corridors of statewide significance. The Commonwealth Transportation Board in 2010 and in 2011 have identified 11 corridors of statewide significance, the ones that you see in different colored lines on the slide. The idea is that these corridors will support interregional travel as well as interstate travel wherever appropriate. I should also note that just because we have shown I-95 only, it doesn't mean it is limited to I-95. In fact, the board resolution includes VRE, Vermata, in the case of I-95, Route 1. In other words, some parallel facilities in nearby vicinity. Route 301, for example. So those are the corridors, and for these corridors, we identify the 6 transportation needs that you see. So those are congestion. We identify where is the congestion along I-95, Route 11, or Route 1, 301. Travel time reliability. So where is the travel time reliability need? Rail on-time performance, capacity preservation, travel demand management, and safety. The reason I share these need categories is because when an applicant comes to SmartScale and say, I want to have a project, I want to do an interchange improvement along I-95, they can point to a specific need that may be shown on the pink map that you were seeing before. Say, I have a project that will solve this need. And we review it and we say, yes, it is meeting that need and it can be scored. Now, if a project is solving a need that is along corridors of statewide significance, it also becomes eligible for high priority funding. So it is important that these acronyms, as tedious as they are, they have some funding parts associated with them and some other caveats. So I took time to explain the first one. I will try to go over a bit faster on the remaining three terms for the sake of brevity, but please feel free to stop me at any time. So first we looked at interregional, how people are going from one part of the Commonwealth to the other, right? Now the second is regional networks, which is focusing on how do people go from Norfolk to Virginia Beach or from Martinsville to Danville. So similarly, the examples of regional travel. So in this case, these are defined according to the board policy using the MPO areas. And if an MPO area covers or urbanized area covers the part of a county, then the entire county is included. And for this travel market, for this purpose, we identify needs that are listed at the bottom of the slide. You will notice one difference. On the previous slide, we did not have needs, walk access for corridor of statewide significance. But here you do, and the idea was that if someone is going from one region to another, they're necessarily not walking, but they might be. But here we are specifically trying to identify needs that are related to walking. That someone might be going from one part of Henrico County to downtown Richmond, for example. The third one is urban development areas. Again, there are different code requirements. I will try to be brief in this, that urban development areas are designated growth areas that localities identify in their comprehensive plan. Similarly, VDP has a business ready city prime. You probably have now familiar with it after going through the smart scale review. So we also identify transportation need for access to those business development sites, IEDA sites, as part of the needs identification. And here you see a bunch of various needs. They all range, they primarily focus on transit, walk, bicycle, and things of that nature, travel within a small area. And finally, transportation safety needs have two need categories, roadway and pedestrian safety need, and they are identified for all publicly accessible roadways in the Commonwealth. So the purpose of this presentation was to provide an overview of the policy that the board adopted back in 2020 and 2020, and also share that we are, to get ready for the next round of smart scale, are going to be updating underlying data sets so for example, travel times have changed in the last 3-4 years, right? So the data that you saw, the pink lines that you see, are representing travel times that existed 3-4 years ago. We want to update those. We also wanted to update the safety information, where have there been crashes and things of that nature. The updated transportation needs will be posted on Interact VTrans unless something goes terribly wrong by the end of this month, and will be available for the next round of smart scale, in addition to the previous set of rounds, previous needs that have been there. So with that, I will end my presentation, and I'm available, Mr. Chair, to answer any questions.
Ms. Sellers.
So particularly in HPP, can it be a corridor of statewide significance, a regional network, or a UDA?
I believe the language is corridor of statewide significance and regional network.
Or regional network, so UDAs are not included?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then I noticed on the corridors of statewide significance, it looks like it's not just inter-travel, but it looks like it begins in one part of the state and then ends in another part of the state. And is that what we're trying to get at here? And I bring this up because Route 3 is of discussion. I know in the Fredericksburg district, and I've seen a letter from the Culpeper district. So how do we go about adding that, or would it be included? Like, what kind of questions do we need to ask to make sure that those two districts are, at least we're having that discussion?
Sure. So I can answer, and then I will also defer to Mr. Lawson. Right now, we have an applicant community that is ready to submit projects for the next round of small scale. So we are focusing on getting that needs done. Route 3 we are aware of the letter that came from FAMPO, and we are looking into it. I will also defer to Mr. Lawson to see if he has anything to add.
Mr. Secretary, Ms. Ehlers, as he pointed, as you noticed, these corridors kind of run from the beginning to the end of the route. What we need to do with Route 3, for example, is kind of understand what that route looks like, because if you look at Route 3 and you get east of Fredericksburg, it really starts, you can really start to question whether it is a high priority corridor at that point. I live to the east and understand that the travel there obviously is very different than Route 3 in Fredericksburg. So we have those, and we're trying to do some analysis to figure out if Route 3 can be done in its entirety, or maybe Route 3 is done at some segment of Route 3.
Yes, I think to what you were getting at, you said it goes from one end of the state to the other, or something to that effect.
Yeah, when
It doesn't have to. If you see some of the ones in the west, you can see it doesn't have to be like that. Obviously, some of them are, but some of them are segments. And so it could be a segment as opposed to an entire road. And I think Mr. Lawson's comments are germane. And so we'll go through a process to see if we think it fits in there, and then if it does, these kinds of things would apply.
So is any consideration given to the fact, I mean, it is a rural part of the state, but it is landlocked there in the northern neck by two rivers. And Route 3, yes, you can go to 17, but it then limits the economic development along there. And so I'm trying to, hopefully they're listening and we can kind of get an understanding of how we as a district can help in the the localities, particularly in the PDC out there, can help be part of this process to make sure that folks see what they're seeing. Because yes, it is rural, but it's also very landlocked. So just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan.
Mr.
Yes, Dr.
Secretary.
Smoot.
Are there any metrics associated with defining a corridor of statewide significance?
Mr. Chair, Dr. Smoot, there are 4 criteria that are looked at, and I will go by memory, so there is a possibility that I may not get all of them right. Yep, but there are 4 criteria. They range from traffic volumes, multimodalism, and other things.
Okay, my second question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sir, Dr. Smoot.
In looking at the I-95 corridor and the I-81 corridor, there are existing highways, a la Route 1 and Route 11, that parallel those interstate corridors. They do not appear, at least from this slide, to be included as corridors of statewide significance. Is that correct?
Actually, Mr. Chair, Dr. Smoot, both are corridors of statewide significance. So just to share a bit more detail, which is each corridor is, while represented by a thick line that you see here, has some parallel facilities. Those are shown as a thinner lines, otherwise the map would have gotten too crowded, along with some rail lines and other facilities, airports and so on and so forth. So Route 11, to answer your question, is part of the corridor of statewide significance.
And Route
so
1 is part of the
Yes, sir.
I-95 corridor,
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Else? Thank you, Jitender. Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Bless you. All right, the next item is Commissioner's items. Mr. Commissioner.
For this month, I'm going to defer till next month, so we can jump directly to your items.
Fantastic. He's busy keeping roads safe and clear of snow and ice. Director DeBrule had to step out to another conversation meeting, so she's not here. And if she has anything that she needs to say, I'll work her back in.
Mr. Secretary, she did remind me that her information that she would cover is in the board's package. So.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. And I don't have any particular comments at this section, so I'm going to adjourn our workshop meeting, and I'm going to reopen our action meeting. And I'm going to go to item number 1, public comment would be first. Is there anybody here from the public that would like to comment? I don't have anybody signed up, but is anybody here that would like to comment? Hearing none, we'll move to the approval of the minutes. The minutes have been provided in your package. Are there any, is there a motion to approve? Captain Byers moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Lawson seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item number 1, action on commemorative naming at the request of the town of Abingdon of the bridge on Interstate 81 North and the bridge on Interstate 81 South over Cummings Street, town of Abingdon, within the Bristol District, is the Master Firefighter Cameron B. Craig Memorial Bridge. Mr. Prezioso.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. The town of Abingdon enacted a resolution in November of last year to honor Cameron Craig's life service and his ultimate sacrifice to his community. Mr. Craig was born in June of 2003 and graduated from Trigg Street Christian Academy and quickly joined the Abingdon Fire Department on May 27th, 2022. He was only 20 years old, but he lived a life of dedication to his community, and he had an unwavering passion to serve others, especially through the fire department. While he was on a response to a call in October of 2023, he was a passenger in a fire truck that crashed, and it ultimately took his life. He responded to countless emergencies and put his own life at risk to help others, and eventually had to provide that life to us. In addition to the town has indicated that it will pay for any of the installation of any signs. So at this time, we don't have any comments from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Prezioso. Mr. Folks.
As a volunteer firefighter with the Abingdon Fire Department last summer when he was
Mr. Merrill seconds. Mr. Folks moves. Mr. Merrill seconds. Let me say this, Mr. Folks. I was a 20-year-old volunteer firefighter before. It makes me think really hard. We have a motion. We have a second. Is there further discussion? So please join me in rising to affirm your vote. Thank you. Item number 2, action on commemorative naming at the request of Giles County on the bridge of State Route 61 Park Drive over Wolf Creek in Giles County. Within the Salem District is the Ronald David Ronnie Sparks Memorial Bridge. Mr. Prezioso.
The Giles County Board of Supervisors passed a resolution in October of 2023 to honor PFC Ronald David Ronnie Sparks for his life service and ultimate sacrifice to the community. Mr. Sparks was a lifelong resident of Giles County in the Wolf Creek area. He was an all-state football player and graduate of the Narrows High School in 1966. He joined the Army and became an indirect fire infantryman in the 1st Cavalry and served during the Vietnam War. He gave his life on April 6, 1968, during the Vietnam War. If you pass this resolution, again, the bridge on Route 61, Park Drive over Wolf Creek in Giles County will be named for him.
Thank you. Dr. Smoot.
Mr. Chairman, and members of the board, I'm pleased to move the adoption of this resolution, which has been requested by both the Giles County Board of Supervisors and the Town of Narrows Town Council.
Thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Sellers seconds. So Dr. Smoot made the motion. Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? Please rise to affirm your approval. Thank you very much. Item number 3, we already acted on, but let me just say this. You know, this lady was a really cool lady. Didn't get to know her for very long, but for a couple of years. And the joy on her face when she was breaking ground was fantastic. So thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 4. Mr. Dudley, you're back. It's action on the economic development access for Dry Bridge Road, Project Econ 016662. That's really important.
That is important.
Caroline County within the Fredericksburg District, Ms. Sellers. Mr. Dudley.
Yes, sir, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. So this afternoon, I actually have 2 resolutions for your consideration. Both are economic development access allocation requests from Caroline County. I provided an overview of these requests at the workshop in December, so this should sound familiar. The first is a request for $165,000 for the design of improvements to Dry Bridge Road, which provides access to MC Dean Manufacturing Facility. $150,000 of the requested allocation is unmatched, and $15,000 will be matched by the county. MC Dean has recently completed a $23 million, 168,000 square feet expansion at their facilities, and the improvements are needed to support this expansion. VEDP has provided support for this design-only allocation, and we recommend your approval.
Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Sellers? Thank you, Ms. Sellers. Is there a second? Ms. Green seconds. So we have a motion to approve and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item number 5, action on economic development access for Ruther Glen Road, Project Econ 016661 in Caroline County within Ms. Sellers' Fredericksburg District.
Sir, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Dudley.
Yes, sir. So the second action I have for you is an economic development access allocation request, again from Caroline County, for allocations to support a major employment and investment site design-only project, which, when constructed, will provide safety and access improvements to world-class distribution, which is investing $275 million to construct a $1.2 million square feet warehouse and is expected to create 745 new jobs. The county is asking for $450,000 of unmatched allocations to support this effort. Again, VEDP has provided support for this design-only allocation, and we recommend your approval.
Mr. Dudley, I think you said a $1.2 million square foot. I think it's
1.2 million
square foot.
Square feet, and I actually wrote spare and not square, so I got it right.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sellers.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move approval with a comment that Caroline doesn't usually ask for much. They didn't submit anything in Smart Scale last year, so I'm really happy to see Caroline County's putting some money on this project.
Fantastic.
Second.
So Ms. Sellers moves, Mr. Yates seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Dudley. Ms. Sellers, you got a lot of love today.
Fredericksburg show.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Well deserved. Ms. Pryor, number 6, action on fiscal years 24 through 29, 6-year improvement program transfers for November 4, 23 through December 8, 23.
Thank you. I put before you just my normal monthly transfers. I recommend your approval.
Are there any comments, any questions? Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Sellers moves. Is there a second? Mr. Coleman seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item 7, action on addition of projects to six-year improvement program for fiscal years 24 through 29. Ms. Pryor.
Thank you. I have 3 projects to amend to the 6-year program. One is the safety project in the Fredericksburg District, and the other 2 projects are studies funded by CVTA, and I recommend your approval.
So move.
Dr. Smoot moves. Is there a second? Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion?
I had a question.
Mr. Merrill.
Yeah, in terms of the, it says it's Virginia Highway Safety Program, this $11 million. Can you explain the funding source? Is that a separate pot of money that we have access to?
It's the safety program. It receives 10% of the construction funds, and these are systemic safety improvement projects in line with the board's highway safety investment plan.
Saw some of those numbers earlier. Mr. Merrill, I think we should see it showed about $130 million, $130 million a year that was in the HSIP plan earlier in your presentation in the workshop.
They're available for any area of the Commonwealth to apply for if there's a safety need.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Statewide numbers, yes, sir. We had a motion, and we had a second. We had discussion from Mr. Merrill. Is there further discussion? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item 8, Mr. Hoffrichter, action on regulatory reduction program and proposed regulatory amendments for land use permit regulations and vegetation control regulations on state rights of way. We're talking billboards and all sorts of stuff here, right, sir?
Not exactly. No,
Sort
sir.
of.
Fortunately or unfortunately, Mr. Hoffrichter is sick today, so I'm stepping in for him. So this is follow-up to his presentation at the last meeting. And today, your vote is seeking approval from the CTB to move forward with the proposed stage of the regulatory process. This is regulatory process for these 2 items, vegetation control and land use. They're the same, essentially the same as what was presented to you last time. Except one addition that we did add. Mr. Kasperwitz asked to add the natural native flowering trees. That has been added in there at his request.
So what he asked us to do is to expand from dogwood to native Virginia
Native flowering
trees.
Yes, sir.
And so we added
That has been added.
We added that in between the last meeting and this meeting.
Yes, sir.
And that's been the only change. I said billboards because the vegetation which grows up in front of them is the subject of a lot of this.
And this does, to your point, does match up with their billboard tree trimming and vegetation control as well. So it makes them both match.
Right, exactly. Any, is there a motion to approve? Mr. Folks moves, Mr. Laird seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Ben, Mr. Coker, sir, how are you today?
Excellent, sir. How are you today?
You got great news for us? I'm doing great, thank you.
Amazing news for you.
Fantastic.
So, Mr. Secretary, members of the board, we have 17 projects today for me to recommend to you in excess of $5 million. First project is Order J88 in the Richmond District. This is a bridge maintenance and repairs project in Hanover County on I-95. We received 3 bids. The low bid of $5,596,000 was within range from Martin's Construction Corporation. I recommend approval.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Davis moves. Is there a second? Ms. Sellers seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item 2.
Next project is Order 125 in the Bristol District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the primary systems in Wise County. We received 2 bids. The low bidder was WL Construction and Paving at a price of $6,117,000. This was within range, and I recommend approval.
Mr. Folks.
Secretary, I move approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Ms. Green seconds. So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Project number 3.
Next project is Order 242 in the Salem District. This is another 2024 plant mix project on the primary system in Carroll County. We received one bidder, Adams Construction Company, with a bid of $7,016,000. This was within range, and I recommend approval.
Dr. Smoot.
Mr. Chairman, so move.
Is there a second? Second. Mr. Folks, seconds. There's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item number 4.
Next project is Order 436 in the Richmond District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the primary and secondary system.
Roanoke District. Got the wrong, Richmond District.
It is
It is
Richmond.
Oh,
Richmond
excuse me, Roanoke is the contractor. I apologize.
You scared me there, sir.
Sorry. Trying to catch you up.
Yeah, so this is in, multiple, or primary and secondary systems in Brunswick, Lunenburg, and Mecklenburg counties. We received one bid, again from Adams Construction, for a price of $7,494,000. This is within range, and I recommend approval.
Is there a motion to approve, Mr. Davis?
So moved.
We've got a motion to approve. Mr. Yates, seconds. We're glad to see those Roanoke companies coming up in the Richmond District, getting a little work going on. Is there got a motion to approve and a second? Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Project number 5.
Next project is Order 437 in the Richmond District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the primary system in Amelia and Chesterfield counties. We received 3 bidders. The low bid from Colony Construction was $7,026,000. This was within range, and I recommend approval.
Davis.
I make motion to approve.
Thank you very much. Second, Ms. Sellers, seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Project number 6, I think.
Next project is Order 520 in the Hampton Roads District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the primary and secondary systems in Sussex County. We received 2 bids. The low bidder, Allen Myers, had a bid of $5,477,000. This was within range, and I recommend approval.
Mr. Stant. Mr. Coleman, seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Project number 7.
Next project is Order 634 in the Fredericksburg District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the primary system in Essex and Middlesex counties. We received 2 bidders. Allen Myers was the low bid at $5,185,000. This is within range, and I recommend approval.
Sellers. Is there a second? Second. Mr. Folks, seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All
Aye.
opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Project number 8.
Next project is Order 438 in the Richmond District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the secondary system in Chesterfield County. We received 3 bids. The low bid of from Branscombe Operating LLC for $10,811,000. This does exceed the range, but I still recommend approval.
And you want to speak to the range?
Yes, sir. So this was slightly outside the range, but the main point I'd like to make is the next bidder was 2% higher, and all 3 bids were within 6% of each other, so we feel this is a good market value.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davis.
I make motion to approve.
Is there a second? Ms. Sellers, seconds. Is there further discussion? Yes, sir, Mr. Merrill.
Just one question, because several of the other projects were the same type, the plant mix, and they came in under the bid. Was there something unique about this one?
I don't have
I'm
it.
sorry, they came in under the estimate.
I don't have it in my notes, what specifically drove this one outside the range. I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
We'll follow up, Mr. Merrill. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Project number 9.
Okay, next project is Order 441 in the Richmond District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the secondary system in Chesterfield County. We received 3 bids. The low bid from Colony Construction was for $5,602,000. This was within range, and I recommend approval.
Davis.
Make motion to approve?
Ms. Green seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Item number 10.
Next project is Order 523 in the Hampton Roads District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the primary and secondary systems in York and James City counties. We received 2 bids. The low bidder, Allen Myers, had a price of $5,022,000. This does exceed the range, but I still recommend approval.
Mr. Cook, can you speak to the other bid and sort of how much out of the range and any other circumstances you might think are germane?
Sure. The next bidder was 5% higher. It was only a $270,000 plus or minus difference between the two. The next bidder was Branscombe, and Allen Myers and Branscombe are 2 of the major players, so we're not expecting more competition, and we feel the close range of the bids speaks to the market value of this project.
Mr. Stant. Mr. Coleman seconds. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Watching number 11.
Order 937 in the Northern Virginia District. This is a plant mix project on the on the secondary system in Prince William County. We received 5 bids. The low bid from Superior Paving Corporation of $5,646,000 was within range, and I recommend approval.
Mr. Merrill.
Approval. On
There's a
behalf
second,
of
Miss-
my colleagues from Northern Virginia.
That's why I called on you, sir. Mr. Merrill makes the motion, Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Next project.
Next project is Order 943, again in the Northern Virginia District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the secondary system in Fairfax County. We received 4 bids. Low bidder of Arthur Construction had a bid of $5,765,000. This is within range, and I recommend approval.
Mr. Yates.
Approval.
Very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Vogel seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Number 12 or 13? Next project.
13.
13.
This is Order K20 in the Richmond District. This is a state of good repair bridge replacement project in Chesterfield County on Route 641. We received 4 bids. Low bidder was Brayman Construction Corp. with a bid of $12,801,000. This does exceed the range, but we still recommend approval. The next bidder was 7.5% higher, and the bids got progressively more after that, so we feel this is a good market value.
Davis. I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Laird, second. Excuse me. Mr. Lawson, seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Next project. Thank you very much.
Next project is Order K31. This is a road widening project in James City County on Route 607. We received 5 bids. The low bidder was E.J. Wade Construction with a bid of $19,225,000. This does exceed the range, but I still recommend approval. My reasonings are the next bidder was 2% higher, and there was a 5% spread between the top 3 bidders. So with the tight grouping and a lot of participation, we feel this is good market value.
How much above the range, Mr. Coker?
Less than 15%.
Mr. Stanton moves, Mr. Coleman seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Next project.
Next project is Order 317 in the Lynchburg District. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the primary and secondary systems in Appomattox, Campbell counties, and City of Lynchburg. We received one bid from Boxley Materials with a value of $7,256,000. This is within range, and we recommend approval.
Move approval.
We have a motion to approve. Mr. Laird seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Next project.
Next project is Order 320. This is a 2024 plant mix project on the primary and secondary systems in Amherst and Nelson counties. We received two bids. The low bidder was S.L. Williamson Company with a proposal of $6,325,000. This is within range, and we recommend approval.
Move approval.
Second moves. Mr. Laird seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Next project.
This is our last project for today. This is order number DB 118 in the Hampton Roads District. This is the design build project for the I-64, I-464 interchange, exit 291 ramp improvements in the city of Chesapeake. We received three bids. The best value contractor was Joseph B. Fay with a proposal of $105,940,000. This is within range, and we recommend approval.
Bam. Mr. Coleman seconds. Is there further discussion?
Mr. Secretary,
Mr. Laird.
could I ask about the other two contractors? Were they local? Or are they out of state also?
Drawing a blank. Sorry.
Chief engineer is coming in. No, they weren't.
Review, but Alan Myers is local and Skanska is local down on Hampton Roads. Both international.
Neither of them are headquartered here, but they do a lot of work here. And you used a term that we haven't used today yet. And
Yes,
you
sir.
said best value.
Yes. Yep, so for design build projects, it's the best value bid, so it's a combination of their price proposal and their technical proposal.
See that on these large projects particularly. All right, thank you. We had a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Ben?
Yes, sir.
You know, it sort of appeared to me as we went through this, excuse me, Mr. Coker, that of the projects that were out of the range, most of them were east. When we do, you know, I'm going back to the time where two former colleagues worked really hard on this estimating to make sure we're sort of doing it in a way that's going to reflect market. Mr. Malvin and Senator Williams worked on that very hard over a number of years. And we've gotten pretty much in sync. I'm just wondering, when we do our estimates, do we change those by region? Or are they sort of regionally based estimates? Would the same project in some other part of the state expect to have the same range as another part? How much influences, not just sort of the underlying conditions, but
We try to remain as consistent as possible throughout the regions, but different geographical areas have different commodities that we look at. Hampton Roads, we have to look at the workload. Hampton Roads has a
Competition.
considerable amount of work, so that gets factored into how we do our estimating, how we do our bids.
that's what I was going to suggest to y'all. With all the work that's going on in Hampton Roads right now, if you think about the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel and all the express lanes and the high-rise bridges and all these major projects, now you've thrown the gap in there. Now you just saw a $100 million bridge project. It uses the available labor, and it tends to drive the cost, right? So we're careful about that, but that may have some impact in what we're seeing here. And so as we chase these things and we talk about trying to accelerate projects, like 81 and other projects, there's a limit. And you can find people, right, but you're going to continue to pay higher and higher and higher costs as you have less and less supply to meet your demand. And so we're always trying to sort of work both sides of that. We want it quicker, because we want the value of getting it quicker and inflation's eating us up. But by the same token, if you don't have good, if you have too much saturation in your supply chain, you're gonna see increased costs because of that. So it's a balance, and these folks work that every day. So good work, good job, Ben, and the rest of your team, and appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is new business, and I'm going to call on Mr. Yates.
Mr. Secretary, I would like to speak to the resolution, the revised resolution that was passed out at lunchtime. As you know, I was not here at the December meeting, but I did live stream the entire banter. So this is, the title of this one, I'm not going to read the entire thing, just a couple of the hearts of the matter.
This has been distributed and posted, I believe.
That's correct. Adoption of transportation efficient land factor for implementation in the Smart Scale project prioritization process and update to Smart Scale prioritization policy. But the heart of it really is over in the middle where it says, now therefore be it resolved pursuant to section 33.2-214.1 and chapter 726 of the 2014 Acts of Assembly, the Commonwealth Transportation Board hereby updates the Smart Scale prioritization policy adopted on December 4th, 2023, by adding the transportation efficient land use factor and adopting the OIP staff recommendation, including the transportation efficient land use factor as a multiplier to be utilized in the Smart Scale prioritization process as set out below. So my motion is to adopt this resolution.
Thank you. Dr. Smoot.
Mr. Secretary, I'm pleased to second the proposed resolution.
Thank you, Dr. Smoot. Is there discussion?
Yes,
Hearing none?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Hearing none?
Hey, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Secretary.
Mr. Lawson.
First of all, my compliments to Mr. Yates for not only drafting but typing two versions of this, and I appreciate adding in the.
Mr. Lawson, thank you for your help.
No, I can't type as fast as Mr. Yates. My one additional comment that I would have is on the last page, and I think it's the same on both versions. We've got a little star and then a two little star, and we're quoting 33.2.353, but we're not. And in fact, where it says the quantifiable and achievable goals, it actually says the plan shall include quantifiable measures and achievable goals relating to but not limited to, and it goes through congestion reduction, safety, et cetera. My thinking on this, and then we're paraphrasing under two little stars, chapter 726 of the Acts of Assembly, and I'm guessing there are a lot more lines in that than the 2.5 that are there. My suggestion to our draftsman over there is either delete these altogether, or if we're going to put these in, then it's going to be long, but put in the full text of these things. I don't think we are intending or would presume to modify what the code says. It says what it says. And so what I would ask is that we drop note, the 1-star note and the 2-star note from this text. So I guess that's a friendly amendment.
Let me see here, hold on.
I'm happy to get advice from staff on that. And I can type it really fast.
Apparently.
Delete.
Mr. Lawson and Ms. Lentz, can you come up, please?
They're coming up. Do you want more? You want to wait for them?
I'm not exactly sure what Mr. Lawson is, what this does, what this does.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Lawson, I understand what he is saying. In the chart on the bottom of the second page, there's a single asterisk beside land use on the far right, and then the double asterisk is shown by under the category A, congestion mitigation. You see the double star, the double asterisk beside the 45%. Those two notes were just intended to add clarity to what those two particular items represent. So if it's the will of the board to just remove the notes, I see where it has no impact to the.
You were just trying to draw them to the section that defined it.
Exactly.
It is what it is, so I don't, take it out.
I think that would be clearer if we did that, because we're saying we're quoting from something, but it's not a quote, just to be simple.
And apologies if
No, that's
that's
fine.
the way it appears, but it was intended to be a reference, not a quote.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, it's not a quote, but I can understand how you might see it.
I
Mr.
think
Merrill.
it's cleaner if we drop those.
Mr. Merrill?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Secretary. We've spent a lot of time talking about land use, basically since last spring, and I recognize the good work that Mr. Yates did with regard to coming up with the resolution working. But the issue that we had was that land use became disproportionately impactful on the ranking of smart scale. And we saw that presented to us that it accounted for almost 50% of the scoring in the last round. From a mathematical perspective, I will have to express my disagreement with having the multiplier be as high as it is. Under that scenario, you would have projects that would score 20 to 50% higher than other projects, but if the lower scoring project did somewhat better on land use, they would leapfrog the project. For example, you could have a benefit score of 3, and they receive the land use factor of 1.5 or higher. They would pass any project that had scored 4 to 4.5 on this prior to having that land use modification, that land use multiplier. So I would be comfortable with having a multiplier, but I would suggest that it should be half of what's being proposed. And I could give you multiple examples where I'm sure if I were a math major, I could figure out the algebraic formula, but you could have multiple examples of a project scoring 8 and another project scoring 10. If the project scoring 8 had a 1.4 and the project scoring 10 had a 1.1, it just seems to me that we are recreating the risk of having one factor materially affecting the outcome of the final smart scale score. So I cannot support the proposed resolution with that factor.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill. We have Mr. Lawson has offered a friendly amendment. Would you accept the amendment?
Yes, absolutely.
Dr. Smoot, do you accept the amendment? So we have a motion on a revised amendment, or excuse me, a revised motion accepting the friendly amendment to strike the asterisk and double asterisk, which were cited as reference. Is there further discussion? Excuse me, Mr. Stan. Dr. Stan.
Is that a tech doctorate or is that
Whatever.
some other type of doctorate?
We're giving you an honorary doctorate today, sir.
I want to join with Mr. Merrill on the multiplier effect, but I want to make a quick statement. And it's simply that we've now attempted to define land use, and whether we did that well or not, it doesn't make any difference. I'm still having a tough time coming to grips with the methodology used to measure the land use that we're going to be using going forward. You've said before, Mr. Chairman, that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The methodology is flawed. It needs to be changed, and if we're going to change it, let's change everything. Let's get rid of the methodology. Let's come up with a methodology that meets the objective of the land use that we're trying to define here. And what we've got now doesn't do it.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Appreciate it. As to my comments, I think you're using them holistically as opposed to specifically, but I'll be happy to clarify that. Appreciate it. So we have a motion and we have a second. Is there further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye. Oh, sorry, Mr. Coleman. I didn't see you. Apologize.
No, that's okay. I concur with what Mr. Stant said, that Mr. Merle has, and I have worked very extensively on running the numbers and applying against projects that were in round 5. And I think both of us, or maybe more of us than just the two of us, have concerns over the unintended consequences, the heavy weighted. And I'm not, you correct me if I'm wrong, but is there anything in the code that would say how much weight is deserving of this application of land use? I don't think there is, but if there is, please correct me. But if there is no specific code requirement for the weighting, I think it gives us some flexibility of compromising and bringing it down on the basis of a fear of unintended consequences. And we don't want to trade off one bad approach for another bad approach. And I don't want to wait till round 6 to try to correct this. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Is there further discussion?
Secretary,
Mr. Lawson.
just more point of clarification. I hear these comments. Is there and I don't think there is, but is there a motion to amend this, or is it objectionable to amend it down to a multiplier of 1 as opposed to a higher number, or is that not in
Multiplier
play?
1 is 0. 10 times 1 is 10. So I don't know how multiplier 1 works, but no, there's no.
I'm just throwing that out
Right.
there.
It'd be 50%.
Listen, the staff and the consultants and the administration has recommended this. All right, we've gone through lots of iterations. In June, we saw deep detail on how it affected and what projects from round 5 dropped or were added. We saw how the scores changed substantially. And so that the motion is the motion and the second is the second. We've had discussion, we've had a friendly amendment accepted, and that's where we are.
Secretary,
Yes, sir.
back to Mr. Lawson's point on the multiplier on that paragraph 2 of page 2, where it says, second step 2 of this two-step process is to use the normalized transportation efficient land use factor as a multiplier. And that's open-ended, is it? And I think this is what Mr. Lawson said, a multiplier of blank, 1.5, 1.2, 1.3, or something.
The
so it's
multiplier should be
specific.
1.5, which was what was recommended. That was the number we modeled after. That was the number we reported on.
It's up to 2.
And Mr. Secretary, Mr. Folks, in the whereas clause, the resolved clause, it says as it was presented as the staff recommended scenario.
At
And for
1.5.
purpose of clarification, could we add a multiplier of 1.5 on all other benefits?
Sure.
I would be happy.
I mean, we're referencing something that's in the minutes, but sure, that's fine.
Plug it in.
That's what I had recommended. Because right now, the multiplier could be 100%, so it'd be, you could double.
No,
this-
it couldn't be 100%. It could be as was recommended in the last meeting. In the last meeting, it was recommended at 1.5.
But in the resolution we have in front of us, it says up to 100%. So you could double the score at up to 100%.
This is a good reason to put it in.
I would ask to amend the motion to add to paragraph 2 after the word multiplier.
Well, Mr. Lawson?
I'll second
The
that.
other Lawson, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll answer for him too if
The
you want.
bespectacled Mr. Lawson, sorry.
So, Mr. Secretary, the multiplier is taking the normalized score, and the top score would be 1. So it would be 1 plus 1, it would make it 2. So like the scenario we gave you in your scenario, the score had a normalized, in the particular project, in round 5 had a smart scale weighted value of 4.2. Its total score was 3.2. When you applied it as a multiplier, so the 41.6 project benefit it had divided by 100, is 0.42. So then 1.42 is then multiplied against the benefit score, and you end up with a 0.24. So that what was a 3.2 under the old scenario is now 2.4 under the new scenario. Because what it's doing as a multiplier is it's increasing the value of the value the project has without it. Because the problem we were trying to address, as you recall, is we had projects with virtually the only score they had was from land use.
So I'm not clear or not.
On the example, if I may, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Merrill, go ahead.
On the example that was given to us by Brooke, the score was a 3.8, but their land use factor became a 1.42, and that was relative to the grading, with the highest being 1 and the lowest being, you would not decrease the overall smart scale score based upon land use. You could only increase your score by land use. And you could get a multiplier of up to 1 double. So if you scored the highest on land use, you would multiply your score by 2. And if you were only at 10%, Brooke is shaking her head, and if you were at 1.1, you'd multiply your benefit score by 1.1, which would be your boost. And what my suggestion was, instead of making it all the way of 1 plus 1, the score plus 1, the score plus 0.5, which would reduce the impact on the multiplier on the benefit score.
Jackson.
Jackson has some more clarity here.
Yeah, how you're explaining it, Mr. Merrill, is correct. So it is the normalized value of the land use scores. And so where you're capping it at half, it's not something we tested. I would say we put out the results of the land use test individually. And I think that it clearly showed how many projects that were 100% land use were removed from the scenario. I think through the testing and what has been posted does clearly show that. I would caution that we have not tested that exact value and that you haven't seen those numbers. So we'd be voting, or you would be voting on something that you haven't seen. Now, fundamentally, is it wrong? Not going to say that it's wrong or right, but it would be then the 100 score would be 1 plus the 0.5 then would be the max. So.
I just want to add quickly, we did run it at some lower numbers, and the impact it made was as if it were not there. So it's, in order to have some value, it needed to be a higher number.
At the end of the day, what we saw when we applied the recommended formula in June is we saw a precipitous drop in the scoring of projects that were predominantly being scored based on land use values. I think we lost 13 projects out, and a couple or 3 came in. And so it was doing, if you will, what we thought the scoring should do in a general concept. While we did that, we're always careful to say, you know, history is not 100% predictor of the future. And so a different set of projects get a different set of outcomes. But in general, applying this factor the way that we applied it drastically reduced the impact of things that seemed not to make a lot of sense for this program. And brought in things that it did. To Mr. Lawson's point, if you drive it to 0, it's 0, and the impact did not, there was no positive or no positive impact in that regard. And so that's why the consultants and the staff selected that number. I think the key for me and for the administration has been is that it puts us in a scenario where we do a couple things. One is we keep it in as a legitimate piece of our discussion, and 2, we make sure that it's in a way that has appropriate weighting and appropriate impact. And we saw that conclusion when we ran those numbers. So that's what we believe, what we believe how it should be. We're getting ready to go out with this round immediately, or I shouldn't say immediately, but very soon to open this round up. And you know, after 6 months of looking at this is what we thought it should be and why. So, you know, certainly we could sit here and run this forever and change these numbers forever. But the results were the results, the intent was the intent, and we think we landed in a good place. Sellers.
Back to the normalized. So you're normalizing this land use factor as it goes into the benefit score, before it goes into the benefit score. And then what are we using the multiplier? What is the multiplier multiplying? So once you create that multiplier, what is it then going to?
So the land use score would not be technically a part of the raw benefit score now. We are just using land use to multiply the raw benefits of other measures.
So we took the whole land use out, right? We took that whole category out. That was 20 points. We took that out and we redistributed those points to safety and accessibility, and we went through that in the last go-around. So this is taking the four pillars that are left, right? And it can modify the scores that come out of those pillars by a little bit and give it some what I'll call extra love if it falls into that category. But the amount, while taking it into consideration and making sure it was considered, and appropriately so, it was designed to only have it weight or impact us in an appropriate manner. So we ran those numbers, we ran it against previous models, we sent that out to the board and to others, said, okay, this is how this formula will work with that set of data. And we believe it will reflect that going forward, but of course, different sets of projects are going to get different answers. But generally, the impact should be the same. So instead of giving it this outsized ability to impact it purely because of where it was, without any other benefits, it's merely taking the benefits that exist and saying, and they're even a little better because this project's in a place that's really benefited by this kind of, this project works better here, helps it better here because of the nature of the place. We think that's appropriate. We think the impact is appropriate, and we think it addresses exactly what we were concerned about, that the consultants and the staff and we all saw early in the year in 2023. So we did this, we came back in June, we ran all these numbers in the workshop, we distributed all this data at the time, and this is where we are with that result. So, Ms. Sellers.
So like in category A, you have congestion mitigation 45, and it's maybe lower now because this is what we did in December. So it's lower than this, but it was still fairly high. And you're going to multiply that?
Is what was adopted in December.
This is
The percentages that you
what's
see
going to
there
be.
is
Okay,
what was
so
adopted.
you're going to take a land use multiplier and potentially add that on to this 45% in congestion mitigation?
What you're doing is you're running all the math, you get the project benefit from each of the five factors. Of course, they are added together, and then the multiplier is applied against the benefit score.
And then it's divided by project cost.
And it's divided by cost to get the smart scale score, correct?
So if I may, Mr. Secretary. So, Ms. Sellers, no project would have a reduction in their score because it's 1 plus whatever land use value is. So if you scored 0 on land use, your benefit score does not change. If you score the best on land use, you will get 1. You'll get 1 plus 1, which is 2, so you multiply your benefit times 2 to get your final smart scale score before doing the normalization. And so it'd be anywhere between 1 and 2 would be where the multiplier would be applied. The 5 categories, as Mr. Lawson just said, it doesn't change the ranking and rating of those. Those still get evaluated on the 5 different metrics. And then whatever that final score is between congestion, et cetera, gets multiplied.
And the results compared to where we were, and if you had run it the old way, are substantially different. Will continue to be substantially different in a comparative sense. And it took us to where we thought we needed to be. And so that's why it was selected. So if we ran it the old way, we had the old scoring system, it would have popped those points up a lot more than that. In the new scoring system, it puts them where we believe it's appropriate, which is much less than it would have been, but it still has an influence, to your point. That's where we are. Folks, we have a motion, we have a second, we have an amended motion, and we have a second. I think everybody's spoken that needs to speak. I'm going to call the question. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say no. I'm going to do it by person. Ms. Green. Mr. Laird. Captain Byers.
Aye.
Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Mr. Yates. Aye. Mr. Davis. Aye. Mr. Laird. Excuse me, Mr. Lawson. Ms. Sellers. Aye. Mr. Coleman. Mr. Folks. Mr. Stant. Mr. Merrill. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That is the end of new business, unless anybody has any more new business for the body. Any other comments?
I have a request, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir. Mr. Merrill.
At next month's meeting, could we get an update on trails? I know we had some discussion about that earlier with the $14 million that Dr. Smoot referenced, but could we get an update on the trails?
If we're ready, we will. I hope to be, yes, sir. We're working hard on that. We've got a lot that's going on there, but yes, sir, we'll, if it's next month, we'll tell you why, and we'll bring it as soon as possible. Mr. Lawson.
I kind of knew old business. A while back, we were talking about getting together and following the code and setting forth standards for renaming streets. If you'll recall, the code actually prescribed a method for, you could pay if you wanted to, you could, but we are the ones that are supposed to set up those standards. And since we're following a format of suggesting new business, I'd suggest we do that.
We'll look at that and bring it back. I'm not connecting the dots right now, but I remember the subject. I'm just not sure where we left it. All right? Y'all please be safe on your way home, and have a blessed month, and we'll see you in February. Right? We're back here in February? Yes. We're back here in February. Thank you very much.